Hello, welcome to the Thursday show at Our Game here. Delighted to be joined by Richie Power. We will have Ciaran Carey in a couple of minutes. He's just a couple of technical issues in the background down in Limerick. Richie, how's everything with you?
Good, Verney, not a bother on yourself.
Good, yeah. I'd imagine you're a happy man after the under-20 victory the other night. We were just saying off air, probably a bit more hairy than you would have liked it, but after a couple of years kind of maybe having poor results at that level and been turned over by Galway, I imagine just getting over the line is a big relief at this stage.
Yeah, look, it's huge. I think you could see that in the last kind of 5-10 minutes. I suppose a little bit of panic kind of set in. I suppose after the way the last 2 years went, even for the lads on the line, you could see the lads with about 5 minutes to go. There was a bit of tension coming on the faces, but no, look, it's brilliant. It's huge for Kilkenny. Like as I said, we haven't won an under-21 for, I think was it 14 years? I think they said on the television. 2009, I believe, was the last time. So it's a long time for Kilkenny not to win an under-20 or an under-21 All Ireland.
Was there a good bit of relief around the county, Richie? It's just like underage success is not everything, and development is hugely important. But for a county like Kilkenny, like your history is like your team, the team you came into at senior level, like there was so much underage success there, and you were part of one of the great kind of underage teams, even at minor in 21. Like I'd imagine it's given the county a nice bit of a lift.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I suppose again, listening to Derek at the end of the game as well, I suppose with the way the two previous years have gone massive. I suppose we'll go in very much the underdogs into the All Ireland final, and I think it's a nice position for Kilkenny to be in, and hopefully one or two lads to come back from injury as well. So that'll really kind of set things up nicely.
Good man, you're playing it down already. In fairness to you, you're definitely playing one for the team anyway. Just a quick comment from Flash there. That under-20 All-Ireland hurling final should be immense. It'll be huge for those Limerick lads having lost to this Kilkenny group at minor level a few years back. I have to say, but looking at the Munster final, I thought it was a step ahead of the Leinster final. But from chatting to people that were down the ground in Dr. Cullen Park, conditions were way more difficult maybe than the TV kind of suggested. Very, very greasy. And there was a lot of errors in it. But listen, it's bound to be when conditions are a bit tricky. The night Limerick beat Tipperary was probably perfect conditions. Just quickly, Richie, I know you didn't see too much of it last night. The minor final between Clare and Tipperary, an absolute epic, draw after normal time, draw after extra time, and then we went to penalties. Clare missed their 3 penalties. I think Tipperary scored, I don't know, did they score 3 or 4? But what do you think of penalties in general? At senior level, it's one thing. At kind of minor level, is it a fair thing for lads, some of them who are only 15 years of age, to go through?
Yeah, I suppose. Look, it's really, really hard last night. As you said, 15-16 was, the pressure of stepping up to a penalty with a Munster final at stake, and it's an awful way to, in my opinion. Like, I know there was 2 10-minute extra times. Why not play another 5 each side or another 10 minutes to try and decide? Because I think it is really tough, and you mentioned senior level. Even at senior level, it's tough. We saw with the rugby last Munster, coming down to kicks as well. Like, it's not a way you want to see big games decided. It should be, whoever's, I suppose, lucky enough to pop up with the next score or some piece of magic that maybe wins it as well. But absolutely, look, it's heartbreaking for Clare, but huge boost for Tipperary, I suppose, with the way the last kind of week gone for them to have a Munster title. And
yeah, without a doubt,
as well. So I think there'll be a bit of that for it.
Yeah, I was just chatting to Shane last night on the phone. I said Tipper back. Of course, he was beaming. He was 10 feet tall again, especially with the seniors performing well at the weekend. Shane, your own thoughts just quickly on that minor game. Haven't watched it. Like, I only saw bits of it because he was doing a bit of training, but caught it after. An absolute gripping affair, though.
Yeah, it was one of the most dramatic games I've seen in a long time. And, Geez, I'd say Clare are cursing the penalty shootouts, because go through the year now, they got knocked out of the Munster Senior Football Championship on penalties against Limerick, and then to lose this one. But like Paddy McCormick, obviously Burris Lee, same as myself, but he had to step up and knock over a free from the sideline with the last puck of the game, and the crowd right on top of him just to send this one into extra time. And the lad was more or less limping over to even get the ball in the first place. So it was like it showed serious cojones there in the first place to knock that over the bar. Then it went to the penalties, and I can understand what when people say, God, you can't have penalties and it's not fair and all that kind of talk. But last night will live long in the memory of these young lads, good and bad, because this game went to a penalty shootout. Sometimes full-time goals at the end of a game, and it's just like letting the air out of a balloon because it's going to a replay and there's no decision. This was drama, but like, it's unfair, but life is unfair. In sport, you have a winner and a loser, and people say maybe golden score, but let's say I win the toss and my team, they decide to play with the wind for the first half, and you get a point or two ahead, and then the second half you defend against the wind, and you're just hanging on, and it's a draw at the end of it. Do I continue to play on against the wind, even though, you know, I've kind of served my time against the wind? So I just thought it was unbelievably dramatic. I stepped in for Ciaran there, but I think Ciaran is right. Funny enough, Richie's Wi-Fi goes a little bit wonky at the time. Ciaran, we have you back.
You have, I think. Yeah, good to see you, lads.
Great to have you on the show. Michael, do you want to take over again now?
Yeah, no, and Ciaran, while we have you, Shane, you might just fire up that clip. I don't know if you've seen this yet, Ciaran, but definitely one of the more unusual things to happen in the GA in recent years. And as is often the case, it happened in a Junior B game, a Junior B football game in Kildare, where a lot of the best stories in the GA come from. Just watch this, Ciaran. So he's playing while on the phone. Now that's the same men can't multitask. And he's no issue getting involved in the play here, as you'll see. He gets in around the goal to defend as well.
He's still on the phone.
He's on the ball there now and everything. I think you'll hear him saying in a second, I'm under pressure here, I have to go.
Under pressure.
Ciaran, that's, you know, have you ever, what's the funniest thing you've come across in a GA game? I thought that was absolutely hilarious, and it is at those lower levels where you see some absolutely mad things happening. I remember the Offaly goalkeeper Brian Mullins, he was texting in the goals one night in a challenge game against Tipperary, and I'll never forget Joe Brady saying to me he couldn't believe, he was looking back at this lad and he was texting while the ball was at the other end of the field, and when the ball came down then he was stopping bullets at one end. Is there anything that stands out for you, Ciaran, your own playing career, anything you've seen on the pitch?
Yeah, I suppose I'd be often saying, you know, I suppose especially in the profession that I'm in, you know, in around addiction, I'd be often saying time to time, you know, the mobile phone is kidnapping an awful lot of people presently at the moment, and you're actually after giving great confirmation around that. And yeah, I suppose the one thing that comes to me actually is Leonard Enright, Lord of mercy his soul. He's a Patrick Swellman. He was full back for Limerick. I don't know, about 5 or 6 All-Stars. Lovely man. And I suppose when I started off my career, I would have played in goals. I was only 17, and Leonard would have been full back. And you know, one of the referees in this particular game would have been extremely friendly with Leonard. So he was coming in around the square to book Leonard, but he was saying to Leonard, "Where are you going afterwards for a pint?" And Leonard answered him. He shot him the yellow card and he ran away.
And I'm sure they met up for a few jars later on that night and they laughed about it, I'd say.
Oh, guaranteed, yeah. That particular one now stands out now.
Richie, anything for you? Anything you're involved in yourself, or anything mad you've seen on the playing fields?
No, to be honest, Bernie, no. Nothing as mad as that anyway, that's for sure. You know, I've seen one or two lads kind of stepping in with a pair of boots or a pair of trousers into a game to make up I think it's the 13 you need to start a game, isn't it? If you're 13, you can start the game. But apart from that, now nothing as crazy as that anyway, that's for sure.
The other one I remember was a college's junior All-Ireland final between UCC and UL down on pitch 1 in UL. I don't know if you know the fella. He used to hurl a bit with Dixborough, Richie. Niall Morrissey's his name. He lives over in Dubai now.
I know Niall,
a bit of a character anyway, but he was hitting frees, and every time he scored a free, he kept doing the Happy Gilmore on the hurl all around the pitch. And Tomas Mulcahy's young fella, Dara, was a selector for UCC. And the big one was, if Niall got a goal, he was going to come over and he was going to shoot Dara. And Dara was going to fall to the ground, and almost like the boys are into their acting and their playing and stuff like that. But unfortunately, they never got a goal and it never materialized. But that's another one that definitely stands out for me. Ciaran, just you were out of conversation there when we were just chatting about the minors and the penalties. Any particular thoughts on the penalties? And maybe, like, there's two sides of it. One thing is building resilience in a young fella and knowing that disappointments are going to come in life and in sport. Another thing is, you know, maybe is it a bit too much for maybe guys of just maybe turned 15 or gone 16?
Yeah, without a doubt. And I suppose the big one there is, I suppose, you know, it is an amateur game. And I suppose even when you're kind of in the throes of taking penalties, you know, we seldom think the knock-on effect that might have, whether it's the goalkeeper that's leaving in 4 or 5, or whether it's the player that's probably missing the goal, the knock-on effect that may have in their head. Okay, presently, that's, I suppose, the suggestion is, and what they're doing at the moment. But, you know, it's a tough one for kids, because, you know, at 15, 16, 17, you know, bottom line is you are still only an old kid, you know.
Definitely,
yeah. Is the replay ever going to come back, lads?
Doesn't look like it at the moment. The thing is, like, the Leinster final is on Monday, so you'd wonder, like, could that game have potentially be replayed Saturday or Sunday? This is probably, yeah, do you know, I'm a big fan of the split season, I have to say, just because I do think it's, you know, it opens up more avenues for club players. But we probably just need another maybe 2 to 3 weeks in the season just to give this opportunity for finals. You know, I don't know if a big
when is that minor final fixed for?
It can't be too far down the line. It's probably by the end of the month, I'd say. But that's going to All Ireland quarter-final stages as well. So maybe another at least Clare are not out and they're coming back into it again, which is good, because imagine how disappointing it would be if you lost the final on penalties and you were totally gone. At least they'll have a shot at redemption. Just a quick one, Ciaran. I don't know if this has ever happened before. I know you've been asked to talk about it a million times, but we're just going to look back on a clip just ahead of the Limerick-Clare game at the weekend, the most famous moment in the history of Limerick and Clare. Just, no need to comment on it for the moment.
The charge of the Light Brigade, 45 metres out, he's a chance to score. He's put it high, he's put it over. Are the All-Ireland champions out? Are Limerick to advance to the Munster final? The fans, the subs are ready to come in. Doesn't go next to near the target, but it doesn't matter. It's all over. Limerick have won. But
we might just, Ciaran, I'm just going to mute it now. Can you just talk me back through this?
I'm going to mute it now. Come here. I'll mute you if I get my hands on you.
I know you don't like bigging yourself up. Richie, would you mind just talking me through that? What were you, 11 or 12, watching that as a young fella?
Yeah, I suppose, look, that is, it's an iconic moment, Verney, really, like, you know, when you look back on it. I suppose Clare defending All Ireland champions, and, you know, to make a run like that up the field as far as he went. Now, I'm surprised no one from Clare put Ciaran on his hole, but you know, when you're going that far up the field. But no, look, it's absolutely brilliant, and you know what? It's one of those clips that it will be continued to be shown over for many years to come. Like,
Ciaran, I won't ask you about the point itself, because I know you probably don't want to talk about it, but can you talk to me just about, like, you were swallowed up. It was almost like David O'Leary after scoring the penalty in the World Cup in 1990. You stood still, I think, at the end, and it was probably the biggest mistake you ever made.
Yeah, but being honest, I have no issue talking about the point, but I didn't expect it was going to come on now, right? That's fine. Yeah, but, and I suppose the match in itself, as Richie said, you know, and I suppose that particular time, you know, Limerick would have been extremely strong. Clare were very strong. And, you know, we were beating All Ireland 94. They won them in 95. And, you know, two very good teams. And I suppose the day in it, I remember it well, you know, it was a scorcher of a sunny day. And I mean, it was melting. And, you know, you were at the tail end of that. And, you know, at the time, you know, I did this thing as a defender that your boots had to be bang on, right? Meaning, you know, I was very conscious as a defender, if you kind of slipped or half slipped, you're giving away cheap scores. So to avoid that, I used to wear the long 1.5-inch rugby studs, right, the steel ones. So I got very comfortable playing with them in the winter. And of course, in my own little madness, even when the ground was hard, I still wore them, right? So I can remember my soles of my feet that day, they were absolutely destroyed. And as Richie said, you know, I suppose, listen, I'm surprised myself, none of them came out, and kind of bottom line, I was kind of waiting for a free or a pop off, and it didn't happen. And I suppose as I was going on, you know, I could smell an opportunity. It was opening up, and you know, I suppose at that time I probably would have got slagging, but my right side might have been that strong. And I suppose anybody who had any notions about that, I suppose I've just put that to bed with that little strike.
That's gas about the boots, Ciaran. Yeah,
yeah.
The Hanafis and Offaly would have always done that in club campaigns with Burr in the winter. Big rugby cogs, just to make sure that they never lost any grip. And I know lads playing in the full back line as well, where, you know, a turn and a slip and you're done. But to do that in the height of summer, I can't imagine what sort of shape your feet were in. When you're going through that, like, do you even, like, when you get the ball, is it just instinct almost? Are you just in the zone? You're not probably even really thinking about what you're doing, are you?
Well, you see, I could milk this, and I had plenty of opportunities to milk it down through the years. But the bottom line is, at the tail end of the game, that possession was vital, whether it was the first possession or the second break. And, you know, I just, instinct, obviously, I took off because obviously I was waiting for a free. And, you know, as I was going on, as I said, the space opened up and the opportunity presented itself. And it went over, and you know, I could have did a few cartwheels on the way back, but thankfully I didn't do any of that, you know. But it was a serious game, like, to be fair. And those particular games in the 90s, and like Richie, like, would have played, you know, in that type of hurling and that type of style. You know, it was a super win for us at the time, you know. And I suppose, looking back, it's all right getting those wins, but, you know, at the end of the day, you have to cross the line in the big one, and we failed in that. You know, so that particular incident is fine. Like, I wouldn't have probably realised at the time, I suppose, the importance of the score and the importance of it, and I suppose how big it got, for want of a better word. I wouldn't have spotted that at all till the time, but I suppose only with the longevity of time that I can sit back when it's up in front of me, you can say, yeah, it's a good old score.
We're just going to move on to patreon.com/ourgame. If you sign up, if you want to see the rest of the show, we'll be talking all things Limerick ahead of the big game at the weekend, and we'll be getting into depth with Richie about Kilkenny's big game in Dublin as well. But we're moving on to Patreon now in a moment. Just to continue, one more question on that, Ciaran. What was it like after, when you're swallowed up by everyone after? I'd imagine it's an unbelievable feeling, like all Limerick folk just gathering around you and just, you know, celebrating a great score and celebrating an unbelievable victory against, without being smart, your most bitter rivals, really.
Yeah, at the time. Yeah, for me, I'll be honest with you, I just wanted to get into the dressing room, sit down, cross the legs and relax. That's what I wanted to do. But I didn't get the opportunity. And to be fair, from a supporter's point of view, because the game was nip and tuck, and if my memory serves me right, I think it might have been Barry Foley, Gary Kirby, and myself possibly got the last three scores. And, you know, and come here, it was just like a wave. And I suppose when that happens, you kind of just go with it. So looking back, it was a nice experience.
Yeah, definitely. Richie, where does that rank for you up in the kind of the pantheon of great scores?
Oh, listen, definitely it's up there, Verney, you know, and like, as I said, it's an iconic kind of clip, and it's showed nearly the whole time. You know, there was a time it was showed at the start of the Sunday game, and, you know, it will be down the road too. But I suppose, as you said, like, to do it in a game is special, but I suppose to do it against your next door neighbours and your arch rivals, I must have made it that little bit sweeter, I'd imagine. It's
always nice to do it at the end of a game when nobody can respond to you as well. It's all
yeah,
life,
exactly,
life
yeah.
in sport. Life in sport is a lot about timing, I suppose. Ciaran, just looking at the Clare Limerick game at the weekend, just given the things that have happened in recent days, and Limerick releasing the statement on Tuesday night. I'll just read out the statement quickly. I just have it here. Just 1 second now. So Limerick statement on a protocol breach. This was just released. It was late on Tuesday night. On Sunday last, a member of the Limerick senior hurling squad was involved in a breach of our team protocols. The matter has been dealt with by management internally and no further comment will be made on the matter at this time. Just your own thoughts on that, Ciaran, when you saw it or heard about it or around Limerick.
Yeah, I suppose I felt sorry for the player and the individual himself, I suppose on the field, there's an awful lot of people talking about, making the right call, making the right decision, making the right pass. And sometimes off the field, you have to do the same thing, and there's only a week between the two games. And I suppose he's after making a little mistake, and as I said a while ago, it's an amateur sport. And, it's, this particular player, he's somebody's son. He could be somebody's partner. And, he's to deal with this now in his own little way as well now, in his own mental health. And whatever disciplinary action is going to come from that. So, I hope the plan's okay for him. Feel sorry for him. And, just in the wrong place at the wrong time, basically, especially when there's only a week of a gap of a match. And if it was this Sunday night, you probably have 3 weeks of a gap for a month of the final. And, they could have went someplace nice and quiet, don't have a chat between themselves. But, bang smack in the middle of the championship, he obviously knows this himself. He's after his judgment, probably made the wrong call, So my heart was out for him, being honest.
Do you, Ciaran, do you see just with John Kiley and like there was maybe some outside noise coming in before the Tipperary game? This is probably something that no manager wants to deal with. It's something that they've tried to nip in the bud now. Do you see it becoming a bigger problem or an issue that might, reflect in their on-field performances or anything like that over the coming months?
No, I wouldn't think so. I think they're a lot more mature and professional to that. Actually, if anything, it'll actually galvanise the spirit and the atmosphere between the squad. Actually, I would feel that would probably, from the outside looking in, it might look as a very negative thing. But I'd imagine in that army of the Limerick squad and the management team, if anything, it'll probably make them that bit tighter, and it'll probably crank it up another few notches.
Richie, what were your own thoughts on it? Obviously, a far from ideal thing to have to be, I should say, going through maybe in the middle of a championship. What were your own thoughts on it when you saw it?
I suppose, look, yeah, it's unfortunate for the player involved, as Ciaran said, and look, it was just a poor choice of judgment, really. I suppose the one big question is like, how he got himself into that situation a week out from a massive game against Clare. I suppose you'd imagine he would have been home recovery mode and getting ready for the following weekend. But look, as I said, it's unfortunate. He's after making a mistake, and I'm sure he knows that. I'm sure he's apologised to the panel and to the management team. And look, it's after being dealt with internally. And for me, I think it should be left alone. Sweep it under the carpet and move on. And I just hope that's the way it is. And I know the way some people can be. Like, you'd be hoping the likes of John Kiley and these guys won't be questioned about it after the game on Sunday. That it's just left alone and they've dealt with it in their own way. I'm sure they have their own protocol. And as I said, they move on. And I think Ciaran is right. It'll galvanise him and it'll drive him that little bit more, I think.
I'm just wondering, Ciaran, like during your own playing days, and I throw this to you, Richie, as well. Did you ever find yourself in not that type of a situation necessarily, but a sticky situation, or people maybe even trying to goad you on a night out or anything like that? Was that ever the case? Because it's almost like inter-county players are front and centre on TV and with different things, and people like to maybe pass a comment to them or try to maybe goad them into a reaction or something like that. Was that ever something, Ciaran, that you were kind of a subject to throughout your own career?
Well, I was thinking there, if social media was around in my time, I'd be a star on it every week. So thank God it wasn't there, Yeah, and I suppose to answer your question, yeah, you will always come across somebody, because and they'll be testing you. And I suppose that's why it's so important, wherever one goes, that you're in good company, you're with solid people, and they can spot it quicker before anything can happen. And unfortunately, we've no control whatsoever wherever we go, who we meet or what they say. But we have control in around our reply and kind of removing ourselves from, as what I would call, unwanted noise. So you would have a certain amount of it that would try to have an old cut off Ciaran Carey, or there's Richie Power there in the corner, and we'll see what he's made of. And this is the kind of a macho image. And I suppose that depends where you go. And if you're going really to the solid places, you won't. But it depends where you go, and that comes back into making the right call, the right choice, the right decision, and with the right people around you.
The same question for you, Richie. Did you ever have that sort of a scenario happen to you, or even were you privy to someone else maybe getting abuse off someone in a, you know, in a pub or something like that, where, you know, a lot of time people are looking for some sort of reaction from you?
Well, that's it exactly. You know, I've never been in a position where, you know, they've looked for a reaction. I suppose myself and two other lads found ourselves in a situation we shouldn't have been in back in 2007. Was it 2007 or 2008? We were out when we shouldn't have been out. But no, I suppose, look, I think the big thing here, Verney, is like these guys are, you know, these guys are well known all over the country. You know, they're, you know, you can call them celebrities or you can call them professionals or whatever you want, and wherever they go, they are going to be recognised. And you're always going to get the one or two lads that are going to try and provoke, try and get a reaction. And like, I'm sure there's phones, there's video footage of whatever happened. I'm sure all of this has been caught on videos and phones, and that's all they want, you know. And I suppose, as Ciaran said, you just need to surround yourself with good people, and, you know, as he said, go somewhere quiet. If you want to go and have a pint or go and have a drink, go somewhere quiet with a few of the lads, nice and relaxed, and just kind of away from the hurly-burly. And I suppose, unfortunately, this player didn't do that, and he's paying the consequences this week. And as I said, I'm sure there's no one more remorseful than that individual himself. You
have me on tenterhooks, Richie, about you and these two boys in 2007 or 2008. You're going to have to elaborate a small bit, at least.
I suppose, look, a quiet pint turned into a night in Waterford, Verney, and we were called in the Tuesday night afterwards by management. So I remember Robbie Lodge was physio at the time, and he was coming back in to give a machine to one of us. I'm not going to mention the other two players, but he was coming back in to give a kind of a recovery machine, and he saw the 3 bags outside the door and the 3 names on the bags, and he said, I'm definitely not setting foot inside that dressing room anyway. So but yeah, no, look, it was one of those times that, you know, I suppose, look, we were in the wrong, and you know, I suppose not unfortunately, you just don't get away with these things anymore at that level, you know. And as I said, it's funny, like Brian was always one that always kind of said to us that he never minded lads having a couple of pints, as long as you weren't overdoing it or doing it every weekend. And you know, and I suppose that's life. As Ciaran said, it's an amateur sport. You have to enjoy yourself, but obviously not to the extent we did that night. Anyway, that's for sure.
You live to tell the tale anyway, which is most important.
Luckily enough, we did. Now, very, very lucky we did. But as I said, if you knew the other two players, you'd put it together.
Very good, very good. I often said to Johnny Pilkington when I'm back home, I wonder how long his intercounty career would have lasted if he was around nowadays. Videos of him supping pints in various snugs around Offaly were being circulated. But just to move away from that and focus on the on-field action, Ciaran, just looking back briefly on Tip and Limerick. And one of our viewers actually had the comment in straight away after you said it the last day, when you said potentially that there could be 5 or 6 switches made for the Tipperary game. He kind of thought that was maybe hinting at complacency. It definitely wasn't the Limerick performance that we would expect. Still, probably the result that we expected. But what were your own thoughts on that performance at the weekend?
Yeah, to be fair to Tip, you know, they came with a mission, you know, and I suppose when the attitude is right, you always have a chance. And, you know, it was bang on at the start. And I suppose they were under pressure for about 10 minutes because there was a load of space there. And I think they put back a sweeper and it tightened it up a small little bit. And, you know, it was very easy home in on, okay, Limerick's half back, they mightn't be itself, or a bit loose, middle of the field. But Tipperary's hunger was huge. And I suppose they were with Limerick up until the 60th minute. And I suppose it would have been very interesting, you know, because there was a few old goal opportunities and they didn't hang any of them really. And if they did kind of hang 1 or 2, you really ask serious questions then with Limerick in the last 10, because in fairness to Limerick, in the last 4 years, they've been extremely strong in the last quarter. And the beauty about last Sunday, that was no different. And, you know, I wasn't surprised in Tipperary. The narrative was, you know, it might have been a handy old semi-final. But, you know, obviously, Colin Bonner, he's looking for the future and he's looking for a big performance. And he got that. And from Limerick point of view, you know, Garrod Hegarty in the second half, I suppose that's the Garrod that I love to see. You know, there was no tipping, no tapping, very disciplined, getting scores, creating scores, winning turnovers, and just getting on about his business. So I thought he did savage second half. Gillan looks lethal again. The whole full back line in the second half, especially when the pressure was on. The three of them were outstanding. And so it finished very good for Limerick, but they got a nice little test and a nice little warning that Tipperary are still hovering and they're not going to handle it.
No, definitely. Richie, what were your own thoughts on it? Good for people making comparisons with your Kilkenny team, just the ability to maybe not be humming on a given day and to still be able to come strong in that last 15 minutes. Like, it is a great sign of a team that so much can be not necessarily going wrong, but that the other team is upsetting you an awful lot. I go back to one game with you in particular that I remember. It was Galway's first year in Leinster. You played them in Tullamore in a semi-final. Canning got a goal after about a minute and did that John Cena thing the same day, and they were up by 5 or 6 maybe 10 minutes into the second half, and slowly but surely kept tapping away, and you won kind of similar to how Limerick did the other day. Like, how impressive is that from a side?
It's massively impressive, you know, and I suppose the big thing about Limerick, and we've seen it over the last couple of years, you know, they don't panic. You know, no matter how things may be going against them, they stay to the process, stick to the process. They work the ball through the lines. Their movement is, for me, is unbelievable up front. You know, like the likes of Gillan, Hegarty, Tom Morrissey. Like, Tom Morrissey just doesn't seem to score any normal points. You know, they're all scored off his left from the sideline. You know, but it all comes from his movements. You know, and it's unbelievable to watch, and I love watching it. And I think I mentioned it a few weeks ago. I watched Gillan in 2019 in the semi-final against Kilkenny, and talk about a nightmare to mark. But I suppose going back to that, you know, some of the players probably didn't have their best games. Diarmaid Burns, Dan Morrissey, these guys, but they stuck at it. As I said, they stuck to the process. They didn't go away from what they've been doing over the last couple of years. And I suppose, look, when they needed to put the hammer down, they did it in the last 10 minutes. And you know, it was unfortunate on Tipperary. I don't think 7 points done them justice. But on the other side of it, if Limerick had put the boot down with 20 minutes to go, what could they have done? You know, I just think it was a little bit of kind of, would you call it kind of playing with them? I won't say playing with them, but I just think Tipperary tired and Limerick just finished like a Rolls Royce, really. And the longer that game went on, and if there was another 5 or 10 minutes left in that game, I think you would have been looking at 10 points plus of a difference. So I think John Kiley will be delighted. They're guaranteed a Munster final, and it'll be interesting to see what he does for the coming weekend. You know, I can safely say he won't want to go to Ennis and ship a defeat. So I think we're in for one rip roar of a game down in Ennis on Sunday.
Yeah, definitely. It should be a belter of a game. We'll go into that in a bit more detail in a minute. Ciaran, it would be wrong of me not to put the Aaron Gillan incident to you, just because there was an awful lot of talk about it after. I kind of think it's the sort of thing where 20 years ago, it's a free out. Hurling has probably maybe changed a good bit now. It was quite loose. What did you think of it yourself? Was a yellow deserved, or is it a red in modern hurling?
Yeah, and I suppose I was doing a bit of work for Limerick 95, so I was up as what they call the crow's nest, looking down at it. And looking at it initially from a distance, I kind of said, yeah, it was 50-50, was it a free? But when I watched it back, but I was conscious because I made this observation on the game. Like, I felt the referee was giving out yellow cards like confetti anyway, right? And I suppose when you're giving out cards like that all the time, handy enough kind of cards, you will be under pressure with an incident like that when it comes up, because you've about 4 or 5 and given up already. So automatically you have to give one, but have I the correct colour? But watching it that night in the Sunday game, initially the 2 hands were there, but he left the left hand go, so it was a wild swing. And I felt myself personally it was a yellow card, and I think it suited the crime. I think if it was red, it probably would have been a small bit strong.
Yeah, no. It seems to be 50-50 people are coming down on this, Richie. What were your own thoughts on it? I just think it was very loose. I tell you what, if it was a league game, 100%, I think he would have been sent off. And I totally agree with what Ciaran said there. When you give a yellow, you know, for, you know, a pull of a jersey, you know, that's poles apart with, you know, a loose stroke like that. So there has to be a bit of kind of uniformity in you know, what you're giving a yellow for. But what were your own thoughts on it, Richie?
Yeah, I suppose, look, watching it in real time in the game, I was worried for him, you know, when the incident happened, when I saw the replay, and yeah, maybe a yellow was the right decision, but I don't think anyone would have objected if it was a red card either. I don't think there would have been too much made of it. It was reckless. I suppose luckily for him, he let go the hurl with the right hand as well. And actually, I think that kind of made it look a little bit worse, you know, when it kind of came in with one hand. But no, look, you know, it's you can look at it one of both ways. I think Aaron will admit himself it was reckless. And as I said, if the card had been red, I don't think he would have had too many complaints. The referee showed the yellow. In fairness to the tip boys, they didn't make too much of it, you know, which, you know, sometimes you can do. And they just got on with it. So, but look, as I said, it was very, very, I think he was lucky in one way. Because as you said there, the ref was giving out yellows for seeming, you know, very meaningless fouls. And this kind of looked a little bit raw, I suppose, from whatever angle you looked at it. So a little bit lucky, got away with it, and he's free for the next day. But definitely, as I said, it wouldn't have been. I don't think there would have been any complaints from any side if the colour of the card had been red.
Ciaran, does Aaron Gillane have a small bit of a target on his back now? Something similar to maybe what Gearóid Hegarty had on his back maybe after last year's campaign?
I suppose, listen, Aaron for the last number of years, and he got the line against Cork, and I suppose if there's a corner back coming out tactically trying to get Aaron going, and I suppose that's where Aaron, of course, he's going to be targeted. And I suppose it might be a bit unfair to mention players because there's so many of them that you can target in Limerick. But I suppose from Aaron's point of view, he needs to be fully aware any time that he goes out that there is a possibility of that might happen. And I suppose it's at that stage then that he has to be in the fullness of his emotional self, irrespective of what's going on. He should see that as a positive, really. You know, anybody that's trying to antagonize him, you know, they're obviously doing it, and they're doing it tactically. But up until this point in the last 3 games, bar that little incident, you know, I have to say, if he continues the way he is, he'll probably get hurler of the year because he's after 3 cracking games under his belt. We've spoken about him here on every show. And, you know, he's actually, and not only him, but the whole Limerick squad at the moment and the team. I suppose I was thinking this during the week, they're all bang smack in the middle of their prime. So they're actually at their monumental best. So it's going to take a serious outfit to kind of derail them. We'll come back to Aaron. Yeah, Aaron will learn from this. I'm sure John Kiley will have set him down and have a little word in his ear. You know, this is only the start of what to come in the remaining game. So you need to be ready for it. You need to be aware of it. Take it as a compliment and keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, I think that's a very good way of looking at it. And plus, after getting a little scare, he didn't get sent off. He could have got sent off. At least you're not hanging your head and thinking, oh, geez, I'm missing the Clare game now. And from a Limerick point of view, you'd hope that this would just wise him up that little bit more, that, you know, that this won't happen in an All-Ireland semi-final or potentially an All-Ireland final, or where he's going to miss a game. Ciaran, just back to you as well. Does Kiley have a bit of a stick to beat Limerick with just after the performance the other day? They got the result, not playing particularly well. He said after that, you know, a lot of lads in the dressing room just wouldn't be happy with that performance. It's kind of a nice position to be in the sense that you're still winning games, but there's an awful lot to work on.
Yeah, without a doubt. And to be fair, any modern inter-county hurler, and I suppose this is my train of thought back in the day, and I'd imagine it's still there, you know, and okay, as Richie said, there's a system there and we play by the system. But even allowing for that, you know, you're setting the bar for yourself, your own individual performances, right? And I suppose as a player, you want to maintain that and bump it up another few notches. And every player know themselves when the game is up. I wasn't probably full tilt there. There was another 20% or 30%. So a lot of players individually will know that and they'll be aware of that. So they will have that to work on. And if you add the spice then, I'll go down to Innis in their own backyard, playing Clare, which is a lot of talk about Clare presently at the moment. And rightly so, because they're doing pretty well. And, you know, they will be ready for it. They'll be up for it. But also, I'd say Clare are licking their lips presently at the moment because they're probably at their best within the last 4 years now to give Limerick a proper cut this Sunday. Whereas in the past, they were kind of lacking players, lacking a bit of strength and conditioning. things mightn't be great on the line. So everything seems to be kind of humming for Clare with their best opportunity this Sunday to give Limerick a right cut.
Just going back to their last two championship meetings, 2019, it was Limerick 128, Clare 13 points. That was in the round robin. In 2020, it was that day Tony Kelly went to town, but Clare were still beaten. It was 36 points to 123. Richie, Clare are in a good spot coming into this weekend. I think the was it the second to last league game where they got a draw with them in Ennis is no harm to them whatsoever. Duggan is back on board since O'Donnell is back on board. Tony Kelly has more game time into him. They'll be relishing this one, I think, especially on home soil.
Oh, absolutely. And this is going to be a huge test for Limerick as well, and we were just talking, I suppose, referencing discipline there, like the likes of Aaron Gallan, Garrod Hegarty, these guys are going to be really, really tested on Sunday with regards to discipline, because you're in Ennis, it's going to be a full house, the atmosphere is going to be electric, and Clare are going to be they will hit anything that moves, I believe, on Sunday. And you have Brian Lohan over you, you're going down to their back garden. If the result doesn't go their way, I can tell you Limerick will know Sunday night that they were in a game Sunday. So I think Clare are in a great position going into this. Two brilliant performances, but still I think there's room for improvement there as well, and I think that's the way they look at it themselves. And I think they'll be relishing this one. And as you mentioned there, Peter Duggan, Shane O'Donnell back, Tony Kelly looks to be coming towards peak fitness, and that's just three forwards. So look, I think it's a huge game. I'm really, really looking forward to it. And we'll know a lot about. I think we'll learn a lot about both teams Sunday. And especially when we kind of maybe analyse it next week, I think we'll have learned an awful lot about both teams and where Clare are, and are they actually All-Ireland contenders.
Ciaran, just from a Limerick point of view, do you expect the boot to stay firmly to the floor and for them to try and get 4 wins from 4 here, or were you expecting 3 or 4 changes, or what way do you see them kind of selection wise? What way do you see it going?
Well, enough, I thought if there was going to be kind of a bit of selection changing and probably playing about 10 regulars and empty the bench, I thought it might have happened last Sunday. But they've 3 games played, 3 under their belt, and I'd imagine they'll want to, I suppose, they wouldn't be saying this, maintain their record, but I say they want to bring up their level of performances, for want of a better word, back to where it was. And Sunday is a perfect exam for that. And to be fair to Limerick, any time they're being asked the question, or there has been certain tests put in front of them up until this point, they've answered them and got honours on each occasion.
Yeah, we might just I'll jump back to the other Munster game in a minute, but just want to look while we have you, Richie, at the Dublin Kilkenny game. Just a comment in from John Moore on Patreon. Buzzing for this. Give Kilkenny and Dublin a nice discussion. He said Leinster this year highly entertaining, and Paddy Deegan won that ball. He said enough of that tip bias. Good to know that parochialism is alive and well anyway. Everybody has their say, depending on whether they're wearing a green hat or a black and amber hat, a green, white and gold hat. We all have our different views. But Richie, how are you looking at this game at the weekend? Kilkenny, you'd probably say they're under a small little bit of pressure now. Like, they have to get a result on Saturday evening.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose Hugh Lawler's out as well, who's going to be a massive, massive loss. And I suppose coming off the Galway defeat, we discussed it last week, but I suppose with regards to the mistakes that they made, 1 or 2 players probably not, I suppose, performing to the high standards they've set in previous seasons. So I think Kilkenny are going in under a bit of pressure this weekend. And I suppose, look, whatever happens this weekend, it's going to come down to the Kilkenny-Wexford game, I'd imagine, Saturday week, as to who qualifies, Kilkenny or Wexford. So for me, I think Kilkenny really need a result Saturday night. I think I think Dublin are waiting in the long grass. I wouldn't go anywhere near the league performance that Kilkenny played Dublin up in Parnell Park. I wouldn't take anything from that, because I think Dublin are really primed for this one. And if Dublin manage to get a result Saturday night, they're guaranteed a Leinster final. And then it puts Kilkenny under savage pressure, going to Nolan Park the following week. But it's set up nicely. I still think there's a huge performance in Kilkenny, and I actually expected to get that in Galway. and I think a lot of players would be disappointed with that. So I'm hoping the 2-week gap would have, re-energized things and got lads focused for Saturday night.
How do you see the reshuffle going, Richie, with Hugh Lawler? Like, I'm hearing that there's a potentially could miss the rest of the championship, let alone Leinster. How do you see that reshuffle? Is it, am I mad to think that Pádraig Walsh could end up full back again, or what? Like, what do you see happening there?
Look, I don't think we'll see Pádraig back there. No, I think Brian has made his decision this year. I know we've seen Pádraig in the forwards in the past and during the league, and then he makes his way back. I think they'll leave Pádraig centre forward. Look, you have Conor Delaney there, who has been pushing the last couple of seasons. You maybe have the option of moving Paddy Deegan back full back, who has played there on 1 or 2 occasions, bringing in maybe Richie Reid or someone like that to centre back. But it'll be interesting to see, because I think over the last 2 to 3 seasons, Hugh Lawler has been one of Kilkenny's most consistent performers. And when you look at Ronan Hayes for Dublin, who is a serious handful, we're going to have to probably, for me, we're going to have to pick someone that's going to suit Ronan Hayes and someone that can do a job on Ronan Hayes. Because if this guy starts going well and starts popping a few scores, he can be a real match winner for Dublin. So, listen, there's no real talk or word around Kilkenny or coming out of the camp as to who will play there or who won't. But it'll be very interesting. But I definitely can't see Pádraig Walsh on it.
Ciaran, what's your management policy on replacing a player, particularly someone in one of those central positions? Do you just bring somebody new in full back, or do you move around the pieces? You'd often say, just what Richie said there, potentially if Paddy Deegan goes back full back, then you're bringing in a new centre back. Do you like just to make a direct switch and a new man come in, or do you take it based on, what players are available to and who you think can do best against a given opponent on a given day?
Yeah, and when you look at Hugh Lawler, I agree with Richie. He's moulded himself into a super solid, safe full back in around the square or left or right. He's very composed, and it's better this guy is getting. And likewise with Paddy Deegan. And I know you mentioned Pádraig Walsh, and I might have said it flippantly last week, but I certainly wouldn't go near Pádraig Walsh because he's probably more important what Keane Lynch is to Limerick. He is Kilkenny in around that area. Everything comes off him, so he's doing very well. I'd be probably looking at my bench and hoping that I'd have someone that I trust, that I could say, right, put him in, it's his chance, I believe he'll do a job there, rather than kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul and pull him back all the time. So if you like, that's what your bench is there for. Bottom line is your 5 subs inevitably should be near enough making your team, because there wouldn't be your 5 subs otherwise. So I would have faith on my replacement 3. It's part of the squad, he's part of the training, and have the faith in him, obviously build him up and have a chat with him and put 3 in his back. And if that is the case, then, he's going to sink or swim. And if he's a thoroughbred, he'll do the job.
Just Carey Power just says, Ciaran or Conor Delaney would probably replace Hugh Lawler, with Tommy Walsh will be a full back and Delaney and Mikey Butler as the number 2 and number 4. Just on Conor Delaney, he was an all-star nominee just only 18 months ago, I'd say, and kept Deise Hutchinson relatively quiet in an All-Ireland semi-final. Has been plagued with, I think it's been quad injuries mostly since, but he definitely has the class to thrive at that level if he is fully fit. Any other particular kind of jewels, Richie, that you're looking forward to in this game? Who do Kilkenny need to? I suppose the obvious one is Donald Burke. Do you see somebody tracking him for the 70-75 minutes? He's like, it's ridiculous how little of a backswing he needs to score from 80 yards. Who, if anybody, do you see tracking him for most of the day?
I suppose it's a good question. Do you know what? I don't think Kilkenny will pick someone to track him. To be honest, I think whatever wing he lines up on, whoever's playing that wing will pick him up. You said yourself, he doesn't need too much space with his backswing, and like, he's in his own back garden as well. He knows Parnell Park better than anyone, and the angles that he shoots from and the scores that he takes and makes. So, but no, I don't think anyone will pick him up particularly. But I just think Parnell Park is such a tight field and such a small field. It's very, very hard to go man mark or try to create space, because it's impossible to create space in Parnell Park. I've played there so many times. And it's one of those pitches where, you know, when you hear the fixture and you hear the venue, you're kind of like, oh, I'm in for it now for 70 minutes, you know, because you just can't avoid or get away from your player or rucks. So I think that's what Dublin are looking for, and that's what Dublin will want Saturday night. They'll want to, you know, drag this into a dogfight, and they'll be hoping then with the crowd, I'm sure to be a full house because they've 3 wins from 3. You know, and there can be a super atmosphere in Parnell Park as well, you know, when it's a full house. So I think it's going to be whoever wants it most, to be honest. And I think this potentially could have been the game that Matty Kenny was targeting for the Leinster Championship, in my opinion, because they still have to go to Pearse Stadium, and you know, if they're beaten, they might have to go and get a result in Pearse Stadium. So I think this was a game that Matty Kenny kind of pinpointed from the beginning of the year. And I think that they're building towards that as well. And if Kilkenny aren't ready, and you know, if they're not on the ball, they could be in for a bit of a shock Saturday night.
Ciaran, just on what our commenter there said, John Moore on Patreon, obviously it does look like Munster is a step ahead in terms of maybe class at the moment, if we're looking at potential All-Ireland winners. But Leinster is so intriguing, isn't it? Like, you do well to call that game Saturday night, and then we're going down to the last round in a couple of weeks where you have Westmeath and Laois playing in a relegation game, potentially, realistically. And then you have Kilkenny hosting Wexford and Dublin going to Galway. Like, it's set up for another one of that bumper finale that we had 3 years ago again. Yeah,
Leinster is hugely interesting. And this game Sunday, you know, as much as Noel as Richie is looking forward to the Clara and Limerick clash, I'm looking forward to this equally, you know, because potentially, and not probably too many people probably would mention Dublin, potentially the only teams that I see when they set up correctly could derail Limerick. Kilkenny is one of those, and Dublin, because of their pace with a big open pitch, potentially could do it also. But I think Kilkenny are in a great position because, you know, even though the last point against Galway, I think Galway were full tilt to get that score, and I think there's a lot more in Kilkenny. And, you know, I suppose from a Dublin point of view, and we said it once or twice in the programme, on their day, they're capable of beating anyone. But I suppose I'm not fully convinced that they're going to come for 4 and 5 days in a row. But if they can do that and show that level of consistency, they could take a bit of stopping. But I think Kilkenny, actually myself, the way the year is planning out, you know, as much and all as Matty Kenny might be targeting Kilkenny, but, you know, in the last few weeks, Kilkenny are actually targeting this one. You know, this is a huge match for Kilkenny, and it's a fence that they have to jump.
Richie, you were obviously involved in 2013. That's the last time Dublin beat you in the championship. I think it stretches back to the 40s before that. So we're basically looking between the middle of 1940s and 2022. Dublin have only beaten you once in championship. Like, is that a psychological thing we're talking about, or is it just that, you know, generally Kilkenny have just been on top during that time? Like, there were games that were quite tight. I think I was chatting to Conal Keeney during the week. He said when expectation was on Dublin's shoulders, they maybe failed to deal with that burden of expectation. But you were put through the ringer in some games with them. Like, remember the league final in 2011, obviously the 2 days in 2013, and the day in 2018 then when Liam Blanchfield got that goal at the very end, and Pat Gilroy's first year, or his only year in charge in the first championship game. Do you think there's any reason why, any particular reason that you put your finger on why they haven't had, you know, that much success against you, while beating you potentially at minor and under 21? Success at senior has been, you know, very rare.
Yeah, and I suppose it has been. Like, I remember those 2 games in 2013. You know, we were probably lucky to get a draw the first day, and to be honest, the second day Dublin were just a better team. But I suppose, as we mentioned here maybe a couple of weeks ago, like, when Dublin are expected to beat teams and beat them well, that's when they maybe struggle. But, you know, going into Saturday night, I'm sure Kilkenny will be favourites. Dublin coming in under the radar, their back garden. Like, I would expect a huge performance from Dublin Saturday night. Now, whether that's enough to get the result, I don't know. And, like, as you mentioned there, they've put in some huge performances against us over the years, but, you know, have come up that little bit short. So, you know, I just think it's going to take maybe one big result for Dublin. You know, I know they got it against Galway 3 years ago. you know, the result down in Wexford Park was huge for him too. Like, you could see the players and the management after that game as well. You know, that was huge for him. So I think belief in the Dublin camp at the moment is probably at an all-time high. And I think that makes him very dangerous, you know, because I remember 2013, at the end of the first game, we kind of trudged off the field disappointed, but Dublin had a spring in their step. And they brought that to Portlaoise 6 days later, and they just never let up. They never kind of gave us a second. They were always in our face. And I'd expect more of the same Saturday night. And as I said, I just, you know, there's always one big performance in Dublin every year. Now, I know people say that was Wexford Park, but I still think there's a big upset in the next 2 nights with Dublin. I'm hoping it's not Saturday night and it's Salt Hill the following Saturday, but I just think there's a big result in them, and I think it'll come over the next 2 weekends.
Did you see Red Mist against Dublin in 2013, Richie, or is my mind playing games with me?
No, your mind's not playing games at all, Bernie. No, to the game or a day that I'd rather kind of forget. But I suppose, look, as I said, it was that kind of a game, and frustration probably got the better of me towards the end, you know. But I suppose, look, it was 2 yellows, and it kind of freed me up for Tipperary the following week in Nolan Park. And sure, I suppose, look, that's probably one game that will stick out in my mind for forever, you know, when we played Tip in Nolan Park, because the atmosphere, the weather, the day, the results, Henry kind of coming back, it was just, I suppose you could say it was nearly written in the stars in a way. But yeah, look, it was disappointing, all right, but as I said, I'll bury that one.
Was it ever, I meant to just never actually chatted to any of the Kilkenny lads about it before, but after Dublin beat you in 2013, and there was a bit of a swell of momentum coming with them from the 11 league win as well, was it ever a conscious thing within your camp that, you know, not to make sure that Dublin didn't take over? I think did you play them in 2014 and give them a good clipping, I think? Was that a conscious thing even from Brian down, or just even from the players, that, you know, Dublin can't be beating us regularly in Championship? That's with due respect to Dublin. I just know that, you know, Kilkenny were and probably still are the kings of Leinster, and you wouldn't like, you know, for a team to be beating you on a regular basis like that. But was that a conscious conversation or anything that happened in your dressing room?
Not really, to be honest. You know, I suppose when 2014 came around, obviously you referenced 2013, but that was it really, and it's no different. I suppose, you know, when Tip beat us in 2010, when we came up against them in 2011, you reference back to 12 months previous. Like, you don't look at the long picture or the big picture. You just look at, I suppose, the last time we met them in Championship, they beat us. And, you know, you have that, you can call it revenge if you want, but, you know, it does hurt, and you kind of hold on to that hurt until you get the opportunity to put it right again. So, but absolutely, I suppose, look, 2013, they won the Leinster final, and I think everyone expected Dublin to kind of really push on from that. And it just didn't materialise, unfortunately, you know. And I suppose the powerhouse that they are in football, people nearly expect them to be the same at hurling. And, you know, I do feel there is more potential in Dublin as a whole. You know, and it's about finding those players and gelling them together. And you know, in fairness to Matty Kenny, he's really kind of brought in a lot of new players over the last couple of seasons as well. And there's a lot of talent up there that, you know, we'll see over the coming years.
Definitely, I think probably consistency is probably the word, isn't it? Ciaran, do you want to come in there?
Yeah, I was just going to say, if you to pick one county, I suppose that's underachieving. I suppose in their level of performances and in their level of silverware. Yeah, you'd have to pick Dublin, okay, because, you know, Anthony Daly was there, Joe Cunningham was there, Matty Kinney is there, and, you know, Matty seems to be kind of building a right squad, and he seems to be in it for the long journey, and, you know, and I suppose his biggest exams are only going to come up in the next fortnight, as Richie said there a while ago, you know. But they're one county, all right, that probably should be winning a lot more and should be producing, okay, traditionally, you get an odd scalp once a year, you might, and then it might stop for 2 years, next thing they come again. But they have the potential to come every year. And, you know, you were asking Richie the question there a while ago, and I think a lot of it would be psychologically and mental up there.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. There's it's a bit, the two huge games over the next 2 weekends. As I said, consistency is just the thing, not throwing in this dip of performance that they maybe have thrown in. If we just look at the other big game in Leinster, lads, and Ciaran, I'll come to you. What are you expecting from Cork down in Walsh Park on Sunday? They've probably really underperformed in their 2 games. Put it up to Limerick for stages of that game. Against Clare, we'd have to say it was a bit of a no-show for long spells. Like, what are you expecting? Is there a kick in Cork on Sunday?
Well, I suppose a lot of people are asking, is there a kick in Tipperary after last Sunday? So if there's a kick in Tipperary, I'm sure there's a massive kick in Cork. But they'd want to get off to a fairly good start in the first 20 minutes. And I think if they create a bit of space and get a few early scores, I think they could be on it. Would it be a major surprise to me if Cork Waterford Sunday? No, but it would be a monumental effort from Cork. They have nothing to lose now, and I suppose I'd imagine going by the players, that they'd want to show, and there's a bit of pride in them, that they'll surely come with one kick, and I'm kind of half expecting that this Sunday, and I suppose, are Waterford ready for that? Will they be ready for it? Because Waterford have to do a small bit more convincing as well. At the start of the year, I think myself, Richie, would probably picked Limerick, Cork and Waterford. That's gone out the window now. It's looking like Limerick, Waterford and possibly Clare. So, and I suppose Cork could have a little say in that this Sunday.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Potentially Tipperary still aren't out of it. If Cork beat Waterford on Sunday, Tipperary beat Cork in the last game and Clare beat Waterford, Tip could potentially still go through on score difference. That's what we're talking here. So it's interesting. That game is at 2:00 on Sunday. We'll know an awful lot by the time the second game throws in what the various permutations are. Richie, what are your own thoughts on Cork? Like, it's hard to fathom. Maybe I couldn't believe the talk about outside noises and pressures, leading to nervousness in the opening few minutes. Like, what did you make of that? I couldn't get my head around that, being honest.
Excuses, Verney, to be honest. I suppose Cork coming off the back of an All-Ireland last year, and I suppose a drubbing in the league final then in the build-up to the Munster Championship, we all questioned whether there was a kick or in these guys. And to be honest, you'd like to think that there is. You'd like to think that they'll show a bit of fight, a bit of passion on Sunday in Walsh Park. I just don't know if it's there. I just think the fight has gone out of them. And whatever is wrong within the camp or outside the camp, as they said, there's a massive restructure needed there. And I think come 3:30, 4:45 Sunday evening, we'll know the 3 qualifiers, because if Cork are beaten in Walsh Park, it's done and dusted. It's just whether who goes to a Munster final to play Limerick, and that means Waterford will have to go to Ennis to get a result. So personally, I think the 2 weeks will have done Waterford the world of good as well. It gives them a little bit of time to regroup and get ready to go again. And I know they ran Limerick close, but I think the scoreline was a little bit more, I suppose, pleasing to them than it was to Limerick when at the final whistle. So look, it has the makings. Waterford, Cork down the years have been brilliant games, unbelievable games. And I would expect it to be a high scoring game on Sunday again, but I'd fully expect Waterford to win and I suppose set up a mouth-watering contest in Ennis as to who goes to a Munster final.
Just lastly on Cork, Richie, are there some elder statesmen, am I blowing it up here too much to say that some of the elder statesmen are potentially playing for their careers at the weekend, and potentially the management team, like that their tenure is on the line as well? Is that too big of a thing to say, or is that a realistic proposition?
Look, it is very realistic. And look, we know mathematically Cork are still very much in this Munster Championship, because if they win on Sunday, it means then that Waterford have to go to Ennis and get a result, and that's not going to be an easy task either. So look, definitely, if you're in the Cork dressing room, going out on Sunday, they have nothing to lose and everything to gain. And I think from what you're saying there is, I think some of the older guys are very much playing for their career. And I suppose the unfortunate thing is, if the result doesn't go their way Sunday, quite possibly you'll see some of the older guys, step away and call time in their career. And suppose if they don't call time on it, they mightn't be, I suppose, in the next management or the management's plans going forward. So there is so much to play for from a Cork perspective. And if there is anything in Cork, you'd be hoping that we'd see it on Sunday. But I think we've been asking that question for the last 2 games in Munster, and we haven't seen anything to kind of back it up. So look, hopefully they'll prove me wrong on Sunday, but I just can't see it.
River Power. I don't know if he's a relation, Richie. River Power there. He just says, why are Cork suddenly going to show up? It hasn't happened in such a long time, which kind of echoes your point. It could be an alter ego of yourself, Richie, I'd say. Do you want to come in there, Ciaran?
Yeah, I was going to say to Richie there, down through the years, I suppose I would have experienced about 7 or 8 managers with Limerick, okay? And, they're all different. And there was stages, where the supporters, were giving certain managers grief and blame, okay? And we're playing also. And like, the penny must drop with the Cork's players at the end of the day this Sunday, irrespective of who's on the line. We have to deliver a performance. We haven't delivered the goods up until now. Are we going to take the easy option and allow the line take the blame for this? So, and if that isn't happening, or if that's not penny and dropping with the inter-county hurlers in Cork, just something seriously wrong. Yeah. But if it is happening, they could come with a performance. And if they get a fairly good start, then you might see glimpses of the old Cork. But as we said, there's obviously serious issues. We know that. The players know that. But there's only one way the players can put that right, and that's to deliver a performance this Sunday.
Yeah. And just on that, I think Liam Cattle is aware of that and aware that there might be something brewing. He was just speaking during the week. He just said it's a championship defining game for us. We really need to put our best foot forward. This is the biggest game in my tenure here, to be straight and honest about it. That's why I'd really appeal to the Waterford public to pack out Walsh Park next Sunday. I'd really appeal to them to travel in their droves and keep their voice good and loud. I know they'll require us to give something to go off. We commit to that. I commit to it, and the players will definitely commit to it on the day. If our players are giving the supporters something to go off, they need to come behind us on this occasion, because this launch pads our season if we can get over the line. Just on Waterford, Richie, probably a decent bit of hype after the league final win, and even just getting the job done, I suppose, against Tip. Beating 3 points for Limerick probably flattered them a small bit, maybe with the goals at the end. But the hype and expectation has been dampened a small bit, and they just need to come with one hell of a performance on Sunday, just get a result and get the train back on tracks again.
Absolutely. And, the tracks have been dampened somewhat, with the Limerick defeat. But I suppose the way I looked at it from the beginning of the season and after the league performance, Limerick and Waterford were probably 1 and 2 in the country going into the championship. And in my thinking then, Limerick more than likely will play Waterford 3 times this year. If form goes to, brings both of them to the All-Ireland final, it's very, very hard beat the one team twice in a championship, let alone 3 times in a championship. So I don't think Liam Cahill would have been massively disappointed coming out of the Gaelic grounds the last time. They stood up to him. They closed the gap, because we spoke about it. The average was 12 points, I think, in 11, previous. Yeah, 11. So they closed the gap quite considerably, and he would have been happy with that. So I think he's still building. If you were to ask Liam Cahill when would he prefer to beat Limerick, in the first round of a Munster Championship or potentially a Munster final or an All-Ireland final, it's a very simple answer. So I think from that perspective, they're building nicely. But I suppose what he said there, it could quite possibly be a season-defining performance from Waterford on Sunday, that if they do put in a massive performance, get the win, they'll go to Cusack Park on a high the following weekend, and it sets things up nicely. But I suppose just finally going back to Cork, what I'd like to see from the Cork players on Sunday is for each and every one of them to die with their boots on the field on Sunday. And if that gets a performance and a result, great. But if it doesn't, at least they can walk out of Welsh Park with their heads held high, and show a bit of passion and a bit of pride in the jersey. Because we haven't seen it the last 2 games. So for me, that's what I'd like to see from Cork on Sunday. And if they do that, they give themselves a savage chance.
Just a comment in there. Another Power. Jeez, they're all in today. Shane Power. I fully believe we need to get 1 to 2 early goals in the first 10 minutes just to really dampen any Cork hope or confidence of them getting really into the game. I think, you always say the start is important. I think it's hugely important here. The tone will be set early. If Cork are chasing the game, I think they'll probably struggle. Whereas if they get on the front foot straight away, I think the confidence potentially will grow. Just on Waterford, Ciaran, do you expect them to, see off Cork at the weekend and just get everything back moving again? It's kind of a consistent team. They've been very consistent since Liam Cattle took over against probably, one of the more inconsistent teams in the championship. We probably have a fair idea what we're going to get from Waterford. I think the intrigue going into Sunday is that we don't know what we're going to get from Cork. And that's, Cork people probably hate that as pundits and neutrals watching games. It's an exciting thing to look at. But what are you expecting from Waterford at the weekend?
Yeah, and Waterford can only deliver and play what's in front of them, right? And irrespective of their record. And, there has been huge expectations on Waterford in coming into the championship, right? And, mathematically, you can pick loads of teams who could qualify. But, if you're going on form, they should be qualifying with Limerick and Clare. But I'm not fully convinced yet because I'm looking at their display, and they nearly got caught against Tipperary. They didn't. They had a nice crack off Limerick. Limerick were out Kyle Hayes, Flanagan, Keane Lynch, and I'm leaving someone else out. So they weren't going to get any greater chance. So, and I suppose they have a nice bit of work to do yet for me to be kind of convinced to say, yes, they're serious contenders. Like, in my head, I've Kilkenny ahead of them as contenders, and Kilkenny haven't even they haven't even qualified for Leinster yet. So I'm just going on the farm, what I'm seeing. And I suppose Sunday is going to be another huge test to Waterford. And if you're going by form, right, what we've seen out of Cork, Waterford possibly should be winning. If they're going to be serious contenders, they should be winning by 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 points Sunday, looking at Cork's performance, right? And exactly what Richie said there, inevitably, this is going to come down to the Cork squad that's going to come out Sunday. They've any bit of pride in their own performances and their own standards. But yet, Cork are capable of doing that. And I'll go back to what I said. If they get off the nice at the start, get a few nice handy little dainty points, with a bit of confidence, then you could see a humdinger of a game.
Yeah, hopefully so. Richie, I'll just get you to call the 2 games in Munster there. Limerick and Clare.
Limerick.
Cork and Waterford.
Waterford.
Ciaran, same question for you on the 2 Munster games.
I'd fancy Limerick and Clare tough to call it now. A few weeks ago I was giving Clare an old chance down there, but I have to keep that green and white hat on me, so I'm going to tip Limerick for that. Cork and Waterford. Funny enough, I'm going to go slightly against Richie because I think there's a kick in Cork, and I think it could be Sunday. I fancy Cork for this one.
Kilkenny Dublin, Richie, lastly. I will just get you to fly through the 3 Leinster games. Kilkenny Dublin first.
Yeah, I think Kilkenny will scrape through, Verney. I not by a massive amount now, nothing compared to the league performance, but I do think there's a big performance brewing. So I think Kilkenny by 3 or 4.
And would it be right in saying Wexford and Galway in the 2 other games?
Wexford and Galway in the other 2 games, and it's going to really set up a humdinger of a finale then the following weekend.
Same for you, Ciaran. Kilkenny Dublin.
Galway, Wexford, Kilkenny. And come here, after surprising me earlier on, because I never realised that Richie got an old red card. I thought he was very clean. I thought he had a clean slate during his inter-county career. I never remember a little red card coming out.
Have you stats in front of you, Verney? Like, that's 10 years ago.
It's great to see a forward getting his comeuppance every now and then. You get away with murder. We're always on the back foot as defenders.
And hey, I love the way Ciaran is constantly mentioning Kilkenny. I think Limerick are just mad to get their hands on Kilkenny after 2019.
Well, I think personally, and I don't know if it's been said behind the scenes, but I think that's the one they are mad to avenge. And I think maybe Ciaran is plumping for Kilkenny because he's just wishing that'll happen. But that remains to be seen. Lads, thanks a million for joining us again. Brilliant stuff as always, and we'll see you again next Thursday.
Cheers, lads.
Jeez, they're great, aren't they?
Yeah, they hop off each other really well. Just 2 great characters who call it as it is. It's great, yeah.
Yeah, and people might be wondering why I stayed in the background while the show was going on. I just think 4 voices might have been just a little bit too much there. We want to get as much out of the boys as we can in every show, and they're absolutely brilliant. But we've plenty more hurling to talk as well, Verney, don't we?
Oh, loads of hurling, loads of football, and I believe you're going to play a little clip for us here now, just to bring us forward into the next part of the show.
Yeah, I was talking to Anthony Nash during the week. Here's a little teaser. We're obviously teeing up that Cork-Waterford game.
Cut the crap. Like, it's a tough game. Like, it's Walsh Park against a team that he just has absolutely chomping at the bit. And even I know they lost to Limerick, they still performed very well, like, and showed true hunger and determination. Like, and I know the Cork spectators and Cork players will be thinking the same, that it's a tough task, but it's not insurmountable. Like, I'm not going to say that, you know, that Cork can't win. Cork can win, like, and I think if they do 1 or 2 little changes, I think it'll help their chances. But look, I'd hope to see a performance that they put in, because they had a great league. Like, that's the thing. That's kind of the, you know, they got to their final last year. I thought they were kicking on the league, and then just unfortunately the last 3 games haven't gone the way that they've expected. But and throughout the Clare game, I thought they were coming. I thought they were coming. Just never got that break. Like, and the goals came too late, then, unfortunately.
Do you know what? As I was talking to Anthony Nash, and you can check it out in the playlist, that full interview. It's a good 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes. I just kind of agree with him in some ways, because like Cork started that game so poorly against Clare, but as they got going, there was a bit of something to them. They stopped losing all the 50-50 balls. They got into it a little bit more. Obviously, there was the red card to Ian Galvin, and you know there's a bit of a kerfuffle going on with that at the moment. That's kind of dragging on a little bit. But they did work their way back into the game. I do feel there's more to them. We're not seeing it. And like, maybe it's partly because I backed them. You know, the way I obviously did back them this year, and they haven't delivered. And, you know, you've obviously run them down a bit over the last couple of years, and maybe you've been proven a bit more right on this. But I just can't believe that this is all they're capable of.
Yeah, no, it is surprising. And I totally get when you have an opinion on a team, and maybe it's a little bit different than what other people are saying at the time, you do buy into it, and you see potential maybe that other people don't see. I'd often be like that, you know. I'd be big into the horses, and you would see a horse that maybe came 3rd or 4th 2 times in a row, but you see something in it maybe that others aren't seeing, and it's probably the same with Cork for you. But there's no doubt in Shane that the potential is there. It's just, are we going to see it? Or, you know, I agree with Anthony to an extent. You thought they were coming, but like, you know, what effect does that have on your confidence then as well? You're coming during a game, but you know, they didn't get there, and they've lost 2 games in a row, and now they're going in. Confidence is bound to be a bit down. The big thing I would probably say is, you know, who are the elder statesmen of the team? Probably looking at Seamus Harnedy, probably a bit out of form at the moment. You're probably looking at Hoggy, a bit out of form at the moment. Doesn't particularly look that happy in himself on the pitch. Probably Conor Lahan, age-wise, is another one that's up there, on and off again, having been back on the panel this year. So it just, I can't see it. There's still a nagging doubt that they could produce something really big and parachute their way back in. But I would have an awful lot more faith in Waterford, to be honest with you, for a body of work. Probably since they beat Cork in that game, and was it October in 2020, the body of work that they've put in since then has, you know, generally, outside of that loss to Clare, has generally been an upward graph, whereas Cork has been up and down, topsy-turvy. It's almost like, you know, they're, you know, their heart is beating perfect, then they're flatlining, then they're up again, and they're down, and they're up and down, and just I'm still a bit of a doubting Thomas about Cork, and nothing in this year's championship suggests to me that I should have more faith in them than I have.
Yeah, and you know, Liam Linehan is saying here, I like Nash's idea of moving Hoggy to centre forward. So again, if you want to watch the full interview with Nash, it's available on the channel there. But when I think about Cork's struggles against Waterford in recent times, like, they've become a bit of a bogey team for them. If you go back a few years, 2019, when Waterford were struggling for wins, obviously, Pádraig Fanning changed his team around massively and probably gave a lot of lads chances towards the end of that Munster campaign. But they lost that game by 13 points down at Páirc Uí Chaoimh. But so one of the players that's probably had a tough time, you know, a few times against Waterford recently is Patrick Horgan when he's coming up against Conor Prunty. Whatever it is, he does quite well in him. This goes all the way back to the first league game where Liam Cahill was in charge of Waterford. And remember, Cork got a couple of goals within 5 minutes that day, sure. And you thought, oh, here goes Waterford again, yet another collapse. Where, you know, the last couple of years they've been beaten around the in a couple of games. But that day, you could see that Prunty was a serious player because he didn't really give Horgan too many chances. And look, we know how great Horgan is. We don't have to build that up. But like the thing is, do you go into this game realising that Horgan doesn't always get on great against Prunty? Do we bring him out centre forward like Nash is saying? But then you're kind of going against everything that Cork want to be out around the middle of the field, which is a team that sprints through the middle of you with the ball. Like Shane Barrett is playing out centre forward because he's a ball carrier, because he's supposed to be able to run down the centre of a defence. And Horgan will be able to go out there and snipe points, like the way Richie Hogan maybe used to do or whatever. But he's not going to be running straight up the middle. Now, he might actually be able to be a bit of a conductor of the orchestra, take the ball, pop it off, give it to the right man, feed it in. So I see the upside of it. But there is a little bit of an identity change, which might be hard for Ciaran Kingston to buy into when he probably feels his management career is on the line.
Yeah, I kind of would buy into potentially putting Hoggy out there for a stage at least. I think it offers something different. Like they don't all have to be able to run down the middle. Why can't it be a fella running down the middle, even if it's Barrett getting the ball and turning back and Hoggy is there and they're taking a couple of, getting some handy scores on the board. I think they're trying to beat every team the same way, shall we say, and they're picking all generally the same types of players. And I agree with you. Like, I'd be a big fan of if Waterford play Limerick in a knockout game, potentially putting Jamie Barron corner forward or wing forward or centre forward and trying something different, because Will O'Donoghue has had the strong hand the last couple of times they've met. So I'd be all for that, and it might give him another kind of a new lease of life. You're kind of floating around. It's a totally different role than inside, completely different. And he just hasn't been getting fed with the ball inside. So maybe that's something to look at. Potentially, with him being out of form, maybe he won't be playing at the weekend. That's another thing. You just don't know. But there's a good few, as I said to the lads, I think there's a good few players potentially with their careers on the line here over the next couple of weeks. And with Ciaran Kingston's probably managerial career on the line, this is his third year now, in his second stint. And COVID has interrupted and all, but he's had a fair whack of time. I was only thinking back to John Myler's reign, and you're thinking, should have beaten Limerick in normal time, 2018, flagged in extra time, but still could have beaten the eventual All-Ireland champions. 2019, they beat Limerick down in the Gaelic grounds. They started off like a house on fire against Kilkenny and then kind of collapsed in thereafter. But probably maybe more consistency. Maybe I'm not giving due respect to the All-Ireland final appearance last year, but I don't know. I'm not 100% sure what they beat en route to the final, and they haven't exactly backed it up since. So I just think it's fascinating. As I said, we don't know what to expect from Cork. For their supporters, that's horrible. You're pulling your hair out. For us, it's the great imponderable, and it's, we don't know what to expect. And I think that's fascinating.
The performances recently kind of forced a bit of revisionism from that run they had last year. Like you're saying, they beat Clare, but it was only a last-second save by Patrick Collins from Tony Kelly that got them through. They beat Dublin in Thurles. Whatever it is, styles make fights. They tend to beat Dublin and beat them with something to spare. And then obviously Kilkenny after extra time. And actually, this is something we'll have to put to Richie Power very soon. He said the fight has gone out of him in relation to Cork, but Cork have actually beaten Kilkenny in the league there in the semi-final. They were able to claw back a deficit and beat Kilkenny down the stretch. Same in the All-Ireland semi-final last year. So if the fight has got out of Cork and, we've had plenty to say about them, what does that say about Kilkenny? So that's something I'm looking forward to putting to him. No doubt he'll have an answer. He generally has a good answer for everything. But the other thing for Cork this weekend is they don't have Mark Keane, for example, as someone that they can call on if they want someone more physical, or if they wanted someone to, maybe go into the half-back line where he plays with Ballygiblin, an AFL player, something I mentioned last week. Maybe he'd have the athleticism to sort of mark someone out of it and then drive forward with the ball and pop it off. That he might be an option. He's away. He actually even spoke about maybe going back to the AFL. I brought this up. He had him at school. So the mood music off that isn't brilliant. I'm sure it was he was answering a question innocently enough, but it just doesn't.
And it was an AFL interview. I will say that. Like, it was the AFL website. So, if you're going to say to anybody that there's a possibility you're going to play AFL again, it is probably to them now. But he did get his passion for GA across fairly strongly in it too.
Yeah, I suppose it's just how it comes across this week. If you want to read into it, I fall in line with what Anthony Nash is saying. I'm sure it's fine. But again, like the revisionism that we're forced into because of the horrible defeats that they've had recently. Well, not horrible against Clare, but not great. Horrible down in Páirc Uí Chaoimh because I was there midway through the second half. I almost felt a sense of embarrassment because of the murmuring that was going on in the stadium at that point. It just didn't feel right at all, I have to say. But there still is performances like what we saw in the league. League is league, but what they did to Limerick, teams don't really do that to Limerick. Like Tipperary kept it up. You know, I was kind of laughing to myself earlier. Tip 2 years in a row have beaten Limerick in the first half. You know, we're back.
I met your brother at halftime in the press box, and that was all he said to me. We're back, and I said I'll chat you in 35 minutes and we'll see.
Was he sheepish enough?
No, I kind of hit my shoulder in the press box, but it's just you can't call GA games halfway through now, particularly hurling games. You just can't do it anymore. I said to you before, I remember Martin Breheny saying to me at halftime, we were in Croke Park and the Munster final was going on last year, and he said, what did I tell you about Tipperary? I told you they'd win Munster. They were beating Limerick by 10 points at half time. And I just went out to him like with 10 minutes to go when the game was over and Limerick had turned things around. It's very hard to predict. It's very hard to predict hurling now. It turns so quickly. Who's calling me topsy-turvy there?
Shane Power.
Burr must be
topsy-turvy. Verney is back with a bang. Burr must be flying in the championship.
I don't know what that means. Is he talking about me hair or what?
I presume it's because I say heel of the hunt and you say topsy-turvy. And
maybe so. Yeah. We should do a bingo game some night with our famous sayings, and viewers can just tick them off, or they have to take a shot every time we say a certain phrase.
And you know, actually, with Ciaran Carey, we'll do it when Ciaran Carey is on, because he hasn't said it. Maybe I just bring it out of him because he hasn't said it in the last two when you present. He loves talking about when a player's got a serious set of pins on him. If he's very
I haven't heard that one.
You don't drag it out of him. And then what's the other one he says? I can't remember the other one, but he's got a couple of brilliant ones. I love listening to them. Come here, do you think Alan Connolly will start this game? Because he came on and made a real impact against Clare. He's got a little bit of physicality about him. It didn't work out from the first day against Limerick. He wasn't great, but I think he did enough the last day to merit a start.
Oh, I think so, yeah. I think you have to play. They're probably going to have to go with players that are in some sort of form. And he's shown, decent form in a recent championship game. I definitely be going with him. And I do think he's one of the few Cork forwards that does add something different. Like, they don't, just amongst their squad, they don't have that 6'2" or 6'3" powerhouse. And that's not to say Alan Connolly is that type of player, but he is a bit more powerful maybe than some of their other forwards. So, yeah, definitely expected him to start. I'm not sure if I'm worried about a kick in Cork, but I don't see it. I just think Waterford have been really consistent over the last couple of years, and I think they'll bring a consistent level of performance. And if you said at the start of the year, where's the one place that Cork wouldn't like to be playing, it's Walsh Park. It is, because with the physicality that Waterford bring to the table there. And listen, maybe it doesn't suit Waterford ideally either, but I think it definitely suits them an awful lot more than Cork. And I think they have a lot of things in their favour going into Sunday. And as I said, expectation is dampened a small bit. Stephen Bennett, I don't know if he scored from playing in this year's championship yet. I'd expected him to absolutely roar into proceedings on Sunday. But it's definitely Waterford for me, I have to say. I think they'll end up with another two wins at the end of it, and they'll end up in a Munster final.
Shane Power says, invariably, heel of the hunt, topsy-turvy, etc. Our game catchphrase bingo would be a serious shout. You do.
We'll do it some Saturday night. We'll do it some Saturday night for the crack around 8 or 9 o'clock.
We will, yeah. John Murray says, John Murray, I presume, Kilkenny beat a great tip. Waterford, Cork, what a great team Limerick have. All in good fun, says John Murray. Absolutely. So call your prediction for this game, Cork Waterford.
Yeah, no, it's Waterford. I think Waterford will win by 5 or 6 in the wind up. Yeah.
Okay, I need Cork to win this game just to mathematically keep me in the conversation for the final weekend. Actually, to keep Munster exciting for the last weekend. So, just one last time. Look, if they let me down this time, I'm done with them. But just one last time, I'm going to go with Cork.
You're not that big into the horses, but in horse racing terms, Cork are your cliff horse. A cliff horse is one that you back and you see the good in them, and then you eventually just follow them over the cliff. That's it. If they're going down, you're going down with them.
Well, another horse racing term that I use, borrow from a friend Niall Keane from from Ballier, is I think they're coming to hand.
That's a good one, yeah. They're coming to hand, yeah. Coming to the boil.
Yeah. So you're going Watford, I'm going with Cork. Clare against Limerick. This is tough to call because obviously Clare have far more at stake here. Limerick have had the week that they've had. I feel that they'll pull Aaron Gillane out of the firing line here. The only downside is, how many weeks away is the Munster final? So I'll actually double check that. But there could be an opportunity for Limerick to rest a few players. Is it would it be a good or a bad thing to do it? You know, because the Munster final is on June the 5th. So that would be, if you took Aaron Gillane out of the game, you're looking at resting him for a full month before you get to that Munster final.
Yeah, no, true. Yeah, it's that's just the way that the calendar has landed for them. It was very top heavy on the front part of the championship. They obviously played 2 huge games the first 2 weeks. I do expect a couple of lads to be maybe not playing, but I've already said to you before, Gillane is never rested. Very, very rarely rested. And I don't know if potentially getting a red card the other day is a reason enough. Like, he's in serious form. Will Kylie just go again with him and just get him to maintain that form? It's like, I remember that league semi-final in 2018. Like, he looked badly injured, definitely looked like he sprained his ankle, and he just stayed going and going. And I don't know if that's a conversation that they've had amongst each other, or Kylie just thinks Gillane needs to stay in the pitch, he needs to get more game time, or we need to do X, Y, and Z. But I have a feeling he will start again, and potentially that there's a couple of others that might come out. But this game is really tight for me. This is 2 to 3 points either way, but I'd be coming down on the Limerick side. It's
kind of litmus test for Lohan in year 3. Like, if they can get a very good performance here, obviously you want to win, but it's a real test of where they're at. As you mentioned, Aaron Gillane, he scored 322 in his 3 games, but just in terms of what he's got from play, he's averaging 1-3 per game from open play. That's serious. That's serious moving. Clare, obviously, Tony Kelly is back and he's flying the last few weeks. But I just want to quickly look at some great stuff that's been online from Paul Ryan. I think it's what's his Twitter handle again? You might have
at know your hurling, isn't it?
Yeah, it is indeed. Yeah, and just this is very interesting between the Limerick and Tipperary game. This is Tipperary overall in open play. Stick passes 19, hand passes 29. So obviously that in total is 48 possessions throughout the course of the game, and you can see the amount of the ball being played around, and the length of the ball, and just the hand pass in general. And I suppose when you contrast it with Limerick, and they've had a total of 95 possessions or ball usages here, I suppose, is the way we'd look at it. Huge amount of stick passes, like 53 stick passes. So they've actually had more stick passes than Tipperary have had ball altogether. Yeah. Interesting that a lot of it is relatively short-ish range. There's obviously a few deliveries here or there where required, but they're very good at sort of using short-range stick passes, and 42 hand passes. So when I watched the game between Limerick and Cork, and I watched it back, in the first half, both teams had, give or take, I'll actually find it there in a second, but both teams had more or less the same amount of hand passes and stick passes during the first half. But it was just the way that Limerick were using those stick passes. They don't tend to try the stick pass when they're in bother. Now, the funny thing is, Tipperary did disrupt them a nice bit during this game, and like, not everyone agrees with me, but I do think that their skill sets here and there did break down throughout the game. Maybe it's just something about this rivalry that it kind of ruffles.
But Ciaran, I agree. If there's a certain amount of pressure put on anybody, their skill set will break down. If everyone, you need a certain level of time to execute something to a really high level. So, and I think Tipperary did that really well. It's funny, like, when you look at, obviously Waterford got to within 3, so that rips it up a small bit. Really, I think realistically it was probably 5 or 6. But Tipperary have been the team that have really put them under the pressure the last 2 years. And it's just funny, you talked about styles making fights. Some styles just seem to match up well, even if it's only for an hour. Then other styles don't match up well at all, like you mentioned there in Cork, Dublin. But just Limerick's use of the ball in that, and how much possession they get in a game. And just, if you see that again, the amount of triangles and different things going on there. They hand pass when it's right to hand pass. They stick pass when they have that little bit more time. And it just, like, to have double the number of possessions or double the number of passes than the opposition team is, it's kind of staggering really when you put it there in, on a graph like that.
And actually, it kind of explains why Tipperary physically seemed to gas out in the last 10 minutes or so, because you could see around the 50-minute mark, Tip were sucking for air. But I have the stats here now. In the first half, Cork had 22 stick passes and Limerick had 31 stick passes. Limerick had 30. So very, very similar in terms of stick passes. And hand passes, Cork had 22, Limerick had 20. So really, really similar. I haven't had a chance to go and do the second half just yet. But to me, the problem was Cork kept doing the stick passes in situations where they put themselves into turnover territory. Like a couple of times, someone hit a stick pass to a player in the middle. He has to stop to control it. Unless it's on the money in stride, which a hand pass pretty much always will be, unless you're a pretty terrible player. So if you have to stop and control a ball, it's much harder to put a sympathetic pass into someone's hand as they're running through the middle. They have to stop, control it, get smacked. Limerick lads don't do that. They do the odd time, obviously, but far less. And then ultimately, over the course of the second half, the decision-making of the team that they tend to play with falls apart. I'm just going to go through a couple of comments here. Kyle Hayes back to 11 and Colin O'Neill out. Hayes versus Conlon would be like a bullfight, unbelievably exciting.
That'd be brilliant.
Hurt his ankle, so Hayes
he should be fit to play. O'Neill should be fit to play. Kylie said he would just need a couple of days rest. He said it was just an ankle sprain, so he might be in the mix.
Yeah, Liam Linehan, Tip front up physically against Limerick every time. Yeah, until Tip kind of seemed to hit a wall in those past two games. Obviously, Lord in the first half, and maybe they should just end the game there as far as I'm concerned. A Sully 180, passing stats should be hand pass, stick pass, and brick flick. The brick flick is Limerick's new passing technique. I think it's going that way. I think we're a couple of years away from people talking about we're going to have to ban, because there's going to be so much hand passing and stick passing backwards to get the ball around to the other side in hurling. I guarantee a conversation is going to start in another year or two. Hurling's gone boring. There's too much moving backwards and across laterally with the ball. Once you take the ball out past the 65 or whatever, you're not allowed to bring it back in, or it's a free. I feel like it's going to go that way, the conversation anyway, in the next while.
No backcourt.
Yeah, exactly. Something like that anyway. So let's call it. Clare Limerick, who's going to
win? Limerick, just 2-3.
I think that Limerick are going to rest one or two. I feel like their championship isn't on the line in this game. So I actually think Clare might just sneak this one. I think they might just sneak it. And Tony Kelly, he went to town when Limerick scored 36 points a couple of years ago. Did he score 8 or 9 that day himself? I think he could do a decent job.
Derek Lynch, Adrian McGrath, and the boys will be having conniptions that you're actually tipping Clare.
Yeah, they'll have less reason to sort of, do the siege mentality. But the last couple of times they've met, Limerick have battered Clare. 36 points to 123. Maybe it's not a battering, but they beat them comfortably in 2020. 2019 definitely was a battering. Limerick 128, Clare 13 points. But the 3 games before that were all won by Clare, and comprehensively in 2018, 26 points to 15. I remember being at that game. Maybe Limerick didn't really need the result that day, but certainly Clare did, and they played like a team who were on top that day. 2017, 317 to 216 for Clare, and back in 2016, scarcely believable that in the games in 2018 and 16, Limerick's managed just 15 points against Clare, but so it was, and that was 2016 victory for Clare also. Hopefully Clare fans enjoy the curse of the Saint. Now the Saint said it, put money on Limerick, everyone else. Clare, end of. Okay, right. We have a couple of other fixtures to sort of pick our winners in. Dublin against Kilkenny. Hugh Lawler being out is a huge one. I've said to you before, a bit like you were saying, that maybe Walsh Park doesn't really suit Waterford anymore because, maybe they're suited to a more wide open field. Maybe the same for Cork. I now feel the same is true of Dublin and Parnell Park. I think they've got more silky hurlers in the team now, and they might be more suited to a more open field, even if they have a slight lack of pace in the team, which the likes of Cork expose example. But I think Kilkenny's physicality might give them an edge here, and I think maybe just by a point. There's an element of once bitten, twice shy in this fixture that I'm kind of going towards Kilkenny.
I'd be the same, Shane. I think Kilkenny have a bit of a point to prove this weekend, and I expect them to prove it. As I said, like, championship victories have been so rare for Dublin over Kilkenny, just in that muscle memory in Kilkenny that they seem to know how to just keep getting the job done against Dublin. It's amazing if that round robin game in 2018, if the result had been different there, if Liam Blanchfield had been blown for free, maybe things would be a lot different. Maybe Pat Gilroy would still be Dublin hurling manager. Who knows? But Yeah, no, I'd be going for Kilkenny here. I'm hearing that TJ had a bit of a bug potentially against Galway, and that's why he was pulled off. That he wasn't in top form. If he's back in top form, I think Kilkenny would be hard to stop. And even I think it's going to be fascinating to see who picks up Owen Cody as well from a Dublin point of view. Will Owen O'Donnell pick him up? Will Keane O'Callaghan pick him up? So it's going to be interesting too.
They actually have a fair selection of players who are very good, fast, athletic cornerback types. If Andy Dunphy is fit, he's an option. Keane O'Callaghan's an option. Owen O'Donnell, like you said, is an option. Paddy Smith is an option. If Liam Rush came on the last day against Laois and had to go off again against Westmeath and had to go off again a few minutes later. And interestingly enough, he came on in the full forward line. So he's played there before, but because he's been quite good since going back to centre-back in the last couple of years, I just assumed whenever he was fit, he'd come back in that position. Maybe the Westmeath game was just a way to give him a few minutes. The game was still relatively tight at that stage, but that's a big blow. So that means that Paddy Smith will probably stay centre-back. So they'll be rejigging things a little bit, or continue to rejig things a little bit, because I don't think having Smith at 6 is necessarily the way they would want to set up. He's a very good defender, but he's not really someone to carry out the ball and do damage the other way.
Yeah, usually you think of your half-backs, your 3 half-backs as your kind of a launch pad. That's why, and I'm not having a go at him here or anything, but I think Dan Morrissey is probably better suited in at the edge of the square. Just because, for what I said to you the last day, I do think Tipperary potentially left him free at times, knowing that he wouldn't hurt him from 100 yards, whereas Dermot Burns will kill you from 100 yards. And I thought they loaded that side of the field to make sure Burns didn't get any shots away. Now, saying that, if other teams do that, I'm sure Dan Morrissey, they'll be saying, bomb forward with that ball, draw a man, or do whatever you have to do if you're left in space or whatever. But I'm just not sure if Dublin's half-back line is enough of a launch pad at the moment. Good defenders, yes. But I put it to you this way, I'd play wing back sometimes, but I'd see myself more as a cornerback. When you're playing cornerback, you're stopping. It's a different type of a game. When you're playing wing back, yeah, you're stopping to some extent, but you're really getting on a load of ball. You're expected to deliver a really good ball into the full forward line. You're expected to be able to score from 100 yards. That's what a modern day halfback does. So I'm not 100% sure if Dublin have that at the moment. But I just think I think Kilkenny will get over the line. I think there's questions to answer, and I think they'll come up with the answers.
Yeah, I mean, it was a one championship win that Dublin have had against them in 79 years, and you already discussed it. Richie Power getting the red card and all that, his reaction was hilarious, I have to say. But Matty Kenny's record against Brian Cody isn't the way he'd want it to be. In 6 games with Dublin, he's lost them all. And the league games, between the 3 of those, it's been a minus 30 scoring differential, so they've had it rough enough there. You would have to say that last year's Leinster final, any chance Dublin had that day was ruined as soon as 4 lads had to be taken out of the equation with COVID, and then obviously Owen O'Donnell going off injured after 3 or 4 minutes.
I hadn't realised, Shane, is it Colin Curry that's on the Dublin panel? Colin Curry. He wasn't on the 26th for that Leinster final and actually played with Nafina a league game on the Saturday and left his phone at home and played the full game for Nafina, and only realised that evening that he was after being called up to the panel for the Sunday and ended up on in the Leinster final as a result. Isn't that mad? Like, it's a crazy scenario to happen. But he was called into it, and he ended up coming into a Leinster final having played a league game the day before.
And even if you extend Matty Kenny's run against Brian Cody back to when he was coach of Galway in 2012 and 2013, back then the record, and obviously Anthony Cunningham was manager, but the record was Kilkenny with 3 wins, a draw, and Galway with 2 wins. That's between league and championship. In the championship, it was 1-1-1 because Galway had that brilliant win in the Leinster final, 221 to 211. This is 2012, obviously, all these games. The draw in All-Ireland final, and then Kilkenny blew Galway out of the water the next day out, 322 to 311. So I would imagine Matty Kenny is desperate for a win. Desperate,
yeah. And it would put, nearly put Dublin in a Leinster final if they were to get a win, and that's where they want it. Like, they want to qualify from Leinster, obviously, but getting back to a Leinster final with a full deck of cards this time is what they want. And like, there was a sense, it was a real opportunity missed, like just having those guys out for that Leinster final last year. that would have been a really difficult game to call with everyone on board. And they performed creditably without them. So they want to get back there again. Huge. This is the best weekend we've had so far as regards, really high stakes, no looking back for a lot of teams. If Kilkenny lose here, they're essentially out, are they? Essentially?
Well, I think the table means that they'll still have a chance depending on the results because, but I'll tell you, we're obviously expecting Galway to win in O'Moore Park against Laois and Wexford to go to Westmeath. This is the second of their 3 games in a row on the road. We're expecting them to go to Westmeath and win here. But there has been huge injuries for both teams. I mean, Laois have been short of so many players. Westmeath boss Joe Fortune said, "I'll make mistakes in selection on the line, but we're doing our best to get this Westmeath team to the next level. Angus Clark and Tommy Gallagher are missing, and Shane Williams is only coming back from injury. When we lose 1 or 2, it does impact the group." They performed really well against Dublin for long spells, but just down the stretch, the Dubs had that little bit more. Laois took a heavy shellacking against Wexford, and you almost feel like Galway and Henry Shefflin riding high now after getting that win against Kilkenny. They're probably just going to pile on more misery here.
Well, they put up a huge score against Westmeath the week after drawn with Wexford. So, I definitely think so. Yeah, I think they'll go for the throat again and try and beat them by as much as they can if at all possible. That's just in their nature. That's what they do. And if they can beat them 15, they'll beat them 20. And we saw of all the teams to be wary and cognizant of score difference, Galway are definitely the ones. I was down in Pearse Stadium when they only beat Carlow by 6, and that basically cost them in 2019, so they won't make that mistake again.
Yeah, absolutely. Westmeath seeking their first championship win over Wexford since 1940, and they're minus 49 points after 3 games in terms of scoring differential. Is there any part of you that wonders, will these 2 teams kind of play a small bit with the handbrake on, knowing that they've got that sort of de facto relegation clash coming the week after?
Yeah, it's a huge game the week after. Like, I'll put it to you this way, Cheddar won't be risking guys that are 50-50. I'll put it to you that way. He definitely won't. Their morale is probably fairly low at the moment. Laois scored 2-15 the first day against Dublin, which is respectable. 1-14 the next day, 12 points against Wexford. Like, that just won't cut the mustard against anybody. So
but the red card killed them. I watched the entirety of that game, and the red card just destroyed them. They were competing well. They weren't going to win it, but they were like 6 or 7 behind, and then all of a sudden, just Rory O'Connor hit hyperdrive, and the goals just started flying in, whether he was scoring them or creating them. And you know what? I can't really see that Tommy Doyle would be the man to man-mark Rory O'Connor in this game. I'd say maybe more Dara Egerton, just kind of size profile, maybe a bit of speed. But I'll tell you, Conor MacDonald against Tommy Doyle. That's going to be a beauty. Throw in 20 high balls between them and just let us kick back and get the popcorn out.
I wouldn't mind seeing Chin in around Tommy Doyle for a spell as well. Now, that'd be like 2 big bulls. We're talking about Kyle Hayes and John Conlon, potentially 2 bulls going at each other. That'd be 2 bulls going at each other as well.
Yeah, would indeed. Okay, the Joe McDonagh Cup is actually quite interesting as well because Stephen Molumphy's Kerry are up against Michael Fennelly's Offaly. And these are 2 players who obviously had the limelight at the top level at different times. Molumphy All-Star, was it 2010 or 2007? He was the league winning captain, I think, in 2007. Obviously had a very good career. People would probably remember that he was in the army, and I interviewed him a few times. I'm sure maybe you did. I'm not sure were you a journalist at that time, but often the photo shoots involved him standing in front of a tank and wearing his army gear and all that kind of stuff.
I marked him a couple of times. I never interviewed him. I marked him a couple of times, and I never minded marking a lad like that.
You gave him lots of it? Did you train him up?
No, I did okay, but he was never. Stephen was like, his work rate was what would kill you. He wasn't necessarily going to kill you on the scoreboard. I'd much rather mark a lad like that than, a Damien Hayes who just wants to get a ball and just run at you every time he gets it. Do you know what I mean? And just wants to hang it in the net, or a Milan or someone like that. But he really, he was an all-star, obviously, wing forward, just real hard-working player. And it looks like he's kind of instilled that into the Kerry lads. That's a huge game. Like, this is basically who plays Antrim in the final, essentially, as long as they both win their last 2 games. Offaly have had a couple of real tough games on the road. They obviously went to Belfast, Ballycran, and now they're down in Tralee. This is a tough one to call, but I think Offaly might just come out with their heads in front. Really good the last day. and really competitive against Antrim the time before that, and obviously comprehensive enough against Meath. So yeah, this is a huge game for both, and just be expecting Offaly just about to get it done.
Shane Power says Stephen Molumphy and Richie Foley were a hard-working midfield pairing for Watford years and years ago. Richie Foley came training with us in Coola one day, must have been about 10 years ago. And I remember we were playing a small-sided game. It was out in one of the schools where we trained. I can't remember the name of the school. But he burst into me, shoulder into the head. He was made of fairly stern stuff. I didn't much enjoy that, to say. Carlo against Down this week. You actually have a note written in here. I think you should read out the note that you put in about Carlo against Down.
Yeah, some of the regulars will love this. I just said Carlo's form is so topsy-turvy. And it really is. They put up 430 against Meath. Were really, really soundly beaten by Kerry in the next game. And then nearly beat Antrim the day after. Meath and Antrim are virtually through already to the final. Meath have been abysmal. I had written down here. They've been really, really poor so far, and have been miles off the pace in the McDonagh. So there's Antrim are through. They'll probably run the bench a small bit, but there's nothing to suggest that they'd be able to turn over Antrim here in the Christie Ring. Kildare, David Herity's side already through. They're assured of their final place. London and Wicklow kind of a bit of a dead rubber as well. But the game of the weekend there is Mayo and Derry. This is like a de facto semi-final, and Mayo have already won a small little mini battle by getting the game played in McHale Park. Derry beaten in last year's ring final. Mayo last year's Rackard Cup winners. You'd probably say on form and what they've done in the last couple of years that Derry's form is probably a bit more solid. So I'd probably just about tipping Derry there.
Yeah, and then in Nicky Rackard Cup for Manaross Common, Tyrone, Donegal, Warwickshire, Armagh. Laurie Maher Cup is also going on. Cavan Longford, Monaghan against Lancashire, and Leitrim against Louth. Longford and Leitrim both have 3 wins from 4, and Louth have 4 points. All to play for, with the winner assured of a final place there. People probably know that Monaghan were stripped of a couple of their wins for field and an ineligible player. Do you know, as we're talking a small bit about the weekend, there's a bit of football going on as well. Plenty of football going on this weekend. I spoke to David Clifford this week, and here's a little snippet asking him about his interest in snooker, which I heard about recently.
Where my interest came from, it's hard to know. I've been following snooker since I was young, maybe more so in the last few years. I'm a 50-50 split. I'm a Ronnie fan, but I'm also a big John Higgins fan, maybe because of the Celtic connection. In fairness, I would try and watch as much as I can, obviously at the Crucible and stuff like that. But in terms of all the events, I don't know. I just like the tension around the safety battles, and then obviously some of the more free-flowing fellas, the Mark Williams, Ronnie type players. And there's a few good characters in the game too, obviously.
Yeah, there definitely is. I actually just bought tickets for the Crucible next year, so actually can't wait to go to that. In terms of the game itself, do you play it much?
Bits and bobs. I have a pool table at home, right? But I played a bit of snooker when I was in college in Tralee, really.
Highest break?
Yeah, not wasting time. 20 job, I'd say.
Yeah, I got 29 recently, very close to 34, and I'm playing a few years, and you think it'd be better at this stage, but it's just so hard, isn't it?
100%, it's so hard. It's totally underestimated how hard it is, like.
Yeah, and like it's kind of I just find it very relaxing to play it, even if it's frustrating missing shots. Leave the phone away, go into the snooker hall for a few hours, and it's just great to unwind.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, would you do that with any other sports? I saw you said you played golf.
Yeah, I suppose golf would be the main one. Yeah, like that, trying to get the time for the golf, obviously, and it can take a bit out of you at times if you're walking. So I would try and if I'm playing, I try and get out in the evening maybe and take a buggy. I remember in Killarney, so it's class just to have the 2 courses 2 or 3 minutes away from the house, so it's ideal. But yeah, like golf is probably the one where, like you said, you kind of can leave the phone in the bag and you can switch off. Also for very frustrating at times, but sure, that's all part of it.
Yeah. Right, so the full interview is on our game.ie there. You can go and have a look at that whenever you want. He's good old crack to chat to, I have to say. But
it's only natural that he would be Snooker Loopy. Who wrote the Snooker Loopy song? Chaz and Dave Clifford.
No, I wouldn't mind getting him on the table. Something, you're a big snooker fanatic yourself. I mean, this video makes itself, doesn't it?
I'm just delighted that my top break is higher than David Clifford's.
What's your top break?
I made a 50 one night, and
Jeez,
Andrew
so
Sullivan
good.
that watches the show, I think it was him that was counting the same night, but just in the zone, got in around the black, probably six reds and blacks, maybe 7 actually. I forget, maybe it came down from the blue after the first red, but it was just, perfect cubo control.
When I was saying to him there, I got to 29. I had a couple of options of what color I'd play, and I went for a tight blue to the middle, so that I could go up off the top end cushion and back down into position for another red.
Did you even pot the blue?
Well, that was the thing. I cut it like it was a tight cut, but I just thought if I want to keep this, I'm looking for glory here. If I want to get back onto a red, this is the one I need to play. And it just slipped out. It wiped its feet and said, "I'm not going in."
It was a tin schnick, as they'd say at the Crucible.
Yeah. Well, David Clifford isn't playing this weekend, but there is football going on in Munster to see who will meet his Kerry in the final. Tipperary are up against Limerick. Obviously, Limerick are here by dint of winning a penalty shootout. Tipperary had a little bit easier after a slow start against Waterford. But, a couple of years ago, these teams had to go to extra time. Tipperary went on to win the Munster Championship, but revenge will be on Billy Lee's mind here.
I think so. Remember Conor Sweeney's lying ball to force extra time. Absolutely epic score. And Limerick were the ones, I'd say, that felt most hard done by. A lot of people felt hard done by in Munster that year. Kerry, Cork, and then probably Limerick into the mix as well. But just interesting to hear David Power chatting to Tip FM during the week. He just said, speaking of Limerick, he said, "I'm sure they're thinking of last November 2020 that we kind of robbed them. So that's going to be a great game. It's in Thurles, and hopefully now we can get a big Tip crowd added for us. If we get promoted and get to a Munster final and back into a Sam Maguire, we would be after hitting a lot of our targets. So this is a huge game. Just a big opportunity for both. From a Limerick point of view, the progress that they've made, getting promoted to Division 2, and as I said to you before, Billy Lee just turning the whole thing around after 53 players, turned down a call in 2018. All of a sudden, 5 years later, looking at next year, they're going to be playing league football against the Dubs, which I just couldn't have dreamed of, really. And for what they've done so far, what they've done the last 3 or 4 years, a Munster final place would definitely be deserving of what they've done, but they're going to have to earn it against Tip.
Yeah, they certainly will. In the Ulster Senior Football semi-final, Monaghan are against Derry. Monaghan had a very good win against, I suppose, a beleaguered Down recently. And I think 4 more players have left the Down panel in the last few days. So the mood music there is terrible. Really, really bad there. It's going to be tough for James McCartan going into the Tailteann Cup now. Derry had a brilliant win over Tyrone. Won very comfortably for a finish. Obviously, that red card to Brian Kennedy changed things, but still felt like it was going Derry's way either way. So this is a cracking game. Tough one to call.
This is a brilliant game because there's all sorts of avenues open up for the winner, whereas the loser's going into a horrible qualifier draw. Potential
delicious quarterfinal or qualifier draw.
Well, yeah, for us, very much so. But if you're going in, you just exactly. Yes. Whereas the winner, the incentives are huge. They both really fancy hopping off Donegal in the final. Chance of winning Ulster. Monaghan haven't won one in a few years. Derry haven't won one. I can't think off the top of my head when the last time was that they won one, but it's not today or yesterday. So huge incentive for both. And I don't think has Banty won an Ulster title with Monaghan during his 2 tenures.
I think it was Malachy O'Rourke who won it.
Yeah, I think so.
I think he got close and brought them on a long stretch. But yeah, I think it was Malachy.
And they look like they've developed a bit more, even, mowing in at the edge of the square. Conor McManus a little bit less reliant on him, which you want to be, which would potentially allow him to flourish a bit more because he might get a bit more space because they're focusing maybe more attention on Jack McCarran. The Hugheses just look totally re-energised and rejuvenated as well. And then you have a Derry team who pull out that game against Galway in the league, and they've had a pretty flawless year so far. So, that's one of the games of the weekend.
Yeah, in Leinster Senior Football Championship, Kildare against Westmeath. And on Monday, we're going to have Davy Burke on, the former Kildare under-20 manager, the All-Ireland winners from a few years ago. And obviously, he managed Wicklow as well. We're going to have him on reviewing that game and all the other football from the weekend. But Kildare are going to be against Westmeath. And actually, it brought up an interesting topic and a question from Mark Tobin, who's a regular viewer, who asked, are Kildare the best dual county in Ireland? Now, Cork are obviously labouring a little bit, but obviously they're a better hurling county than Kildare at the moment, even though Kildare are making great strides. You'd imagine Kildare would beat Cork just at the moment in football. Galway, certainly a better hurling team. You'd probably just about favour Galway to beat them in football as well?
Probably just about. I suppose this is probably maybe something looking towards a couple of years down the line. If you have Deise winning an All-Ireland intermediate club, Kildare, you'd imagine, will probably be in the McDonagh next year and will still be in Division 2A and will be striving to get up to Division 1 over the next couple of years. The footballers were in Division 1 this year and will be hoping to get back there for 2024. They'd be hoping to be in a Leinster final. I think potentially they're a county, there's an awful lot of untapped potential there, hurling-wise. And the pockets, obviously, we all know how strong Deise are, and even Selbridge and Maynooth are getting very strong as well. And I do agree with the view there. I like watching Kildare kicking football now. And I don't know if we would have said that a couple of years ago. But they'll want to tread carefully coming into this game this weekend, because people are already talking about a Leinster final, and maybe they were potentially more wary of Louth in that quarter final than they are of Westmeath. And Westmeath are a real solid, consistent side under Jack Cooney. Ciaran Martin is back from that. I think he did his Achilles, was it the year before last? So I'd be treading fairly carefully there. As good as Kildare are going, and they're much more consistent than they have been in recent years. That's a tricky one for them.
Hey, can you understand why Dublin Meath isn't on TV this weekend? Because traditionally, this is the fixture that in 1991 people say saved the GAA. It had been World Cup fever, Jackie's Army, all that kind of stuff because of how Ireland had gone in the World Cup, and in the 4-game saga, kind of brought the GAA back into the public consciousness. Whereas now, this isn't even on TV. Well,
I'll put it to you this way. What games do you want to see most this weekend? I want to see Kilkenny Dublin. I want to see the 2 hurling games. I really want to see Monaghan and Derry. That's probably my priority list, and they're the ones that are live on television stations. So,
it's a failing of Meath, isn't it, really? And do you know what? They obviously had some great matches with Dublin over the years. They scored the 5 goals back in 2010 and beat Dublin. And obviously Dublin went on a good run in the back door. But Cian O'Sullivan, who was part of the panel back then, I was chatting to him this week about the rivalry, and here's what he had to say.
That rivalry might have waned a little bit in the last number of years. Certainly, I was involved. I wasn't playing, but I was involved in the team in 2010 when they beat us by 5 goals. And I think since that point, the games in Leinster have been fairly one-sided and in Dublin's favour. Meath were making good strides the last number of seasons. Probably not this season. Certainly last year, it was a closer encounter in the Leinster Championship between us and them, and I think in the league was the last year, the year before, it was a tight enough game as well. So, I think that rivalry in the period 2010 to maybe 2019 probably did weaken. It seems to be as Meath go from strength to strength, it seems to be getting a little bit stronger. But it's going to take a close encounter in a Leinster Championship game to really reignite that, which, looking forward to this weekend, I'm just not sure we're going to get.
And if you go back a couple of years, with Meath scoring 4 points in that Leinster match at Croke Park, I mean, that was probably the low point of it all.
It's great when players come out of the bubble and actually speak totally honestly. Isn't it though? And they actually shoot from the hip, because they have been trained to be so guarded against saying what you actually think a lot of the time. It's just he was just very honest about the rivalry for the last 10 years and pretty honest about how he thinks the game is going to go this weekend. And it's just, when you haven't heard that from someone and from a county or a squad for so long, it's kind of refreshing to hear it.
Yeah, and a couple of years ago I spoke with Bernard Flynn, obviously the Meath legend, about the problems with Meath and trying to claw their way back against Dublin, and kind of the identity crisis that they would have had, because it's on the commuter belt. Here's how the conversation went, or a snippet of it.
That shouldn't have happened. I mean, it was actually...
Sorry, actually, I should preempt it a little bit more because there's a crucial part of information here, which is Dublin had just completed the 5 in a row in 2019, and that credit union message in was it in Dunshaughlin or Ashburn?
Yeah.
It went up saying, and Dean Rock, I think he worked with them, and there was a picture went out with Dean Rock wearing the Dublin gear, and a message went out saying, Sam is coming home to Dublin again. Well done to our very own Dean Rock in Meath, it being on the commuter belt, all that kind of stuff. Brian Menton came out and he was pretty frustrated with it. He came out with a statement, the Meath captain. And here's, I just put it to Bernard Flynn. This is in late 2019.
That shouldn't have happened. I mean, it was actually, I thought it was terrible. Brian Menton was a really down-to-earth, humble, class guy. He came out, he was livid, lives in Ashburn there. I thought it was an awful thing. And I just think...
It's embarrassing, really.
It's horrendously embarrassing for everyone involved. But the one thing we see with Ashburn, it's a huge amount of dubs living there. I mean, it is full of dubs, with all due respect.
So for that reason, is there an identity issue in Meath because you have so many people from outside of it living there?
100%. I'm going to Navan, the same thing as well, and it's a huge thing for us. It really is a big problem. Trim, a lot of dubs moving down there. Dunshaughlin, Ratoath. Ratoath it's nearly Dublin. That's the problem we have in the schools and the whole lot. And they're looking at their heroes in Dublin, they're living in Meath, so there is an identity crisis, there's no doubt, in a lot of clubs and those big populated areas and the schools and all that. And it's a big challenge for us to change that. And if you see some players, Mick Deegan's son moving back to play in Dublin, different things like that, he was playing with Dunamore Ashburn, all that end of it there. So we have to try and make our own mark, have our own heroes.
Jeez, I was in good nick back then. I need to sort that out.
If that's your first thought, then that's a worry.
The Toffee Pops are coming again me.
It's funny, I live in Dunboyne here, and I would you're always looking out for GA tops, and obviously the women's football team is big business here because they got to the All-Ireland Club semi-final and won the Leinster Championship. But predominantly the most GA tops I see in Dunboyne, I see more Dublin tops than I would Meath tops. That's just me, and you would notice because a GA person, you always notice the GA topper trying to look at the crest, but it's very obvious there's a sky blue tint to all the gear that's been worn. So it's probably only natural maybe that there is a bit of an identity crisis. As regards that game at the weekend, as I was saying to you a few weeks ago, I was at the Wicklow game. There was very little to suggest that there's any sort of an ambush coming from the Meath side of things. It was a bit kind of laboured. I believe Shane McEntee, the captain, he was captain before Andy's son, the manager's son. Andy actually lives in Dunboyne here. I wonder what he thinks of walking around seeing all Dublin tops around the place. Hardly too happy, but Shane McEntee is back from peacekeeping duties in Mali. He's on a 3-week break, so he's available to play at the weekend. Whether he starts or not, I'm not 100%, but he definitely will feature. But even if Dublin aren't lighting it up, you'd still be very surprised if Meath are getting to within 3 or 4 of them. It's probably Dublin by about 7 or 8 in the wind up for me. It's probably 7 or 8 minimum, if I'm honest.
Yeah, you'd hope it'd be a tighter game. And, as Ciaran O'Sullivan was also saying in that interview, which you can check out, it does need that sort of close encounter to bring it on. And actually, a short little clip from Ciaran was talking about what he expects from this iteration of the Dublin team and with the talent they have. Conor Callaghan obviously returned recently. They still have so many all-stars and key men, like I suppose Brian Fenton is the first one that comes to mind, but they still have just so many key players. But here's what Ciaran had to say.
When I look at that team, I think anything other than a Sam Maguire is not a successful year. That's my opinion. Maybe I'm biased because, of course, I'm biased. But I just look at the strength of that team and the leadership qualities still left in that team, and they're definitely up there. Definitely up there with the best. So yeah.
Yeah. And I'm not a total believer in Kerry just yet. I still want to see a bit more evidence of steel, and you're not going to see that in their Munster run this year. I'm actually starting to lean back towards Dublin to win the All-Ireland again this year.
Yeah, I wouldn't be a million miles away from you. It's just going to be interesting to see. not that they've banished, some of their league woes in defeating a Division 4 team, but they did exactly what they had to do. It was that kind of real mechanical efficiency that we've seen before. This will be a step up again, so it's going to be interesting. They were laboured last year. The writing potentially was on the wall. You wouldn't say that after looking at the first half of the Mayo game, but at stages against Meath last year, stages against Wexford last year, it looked like there was cracks appearing. So it'll be interesting. Maybe it's just polyfiller that's been put in the cracks, and it'll only last for a year or two. But there's still potentially an All-Ireland in Dublin this year, without a doubt, yeah. And as you say, the doubts are real about Kerry, because until they go and prove it, they had history would be completely different had they gotten over the line in 2019 against Dublin, but they didn't. And David Clifford is 5 years into his Kerry career. Will go down as one of the best of all time if he stays at the same levels. If he can get that first All-Ireland, you think he ends up with 4 or 5 probably minimum, but getting that first one is a really difficult thing to do, and they have questions to answer yet that will not be answered until the cut and thrust of 10-15 minutes going down the home straight in the semi-final or final.
And as you mentioned, winning All-Ireland, the under-20 All-Ireland final is this weekend. Could be a cracker too. Kildare against Tyrone, and Kildare won this a couple of years ago, as we were talking about just a while ago, under Davy Burke. Kildare had a 12 points to 7 win over Sligo. I found Sligo very frustrating throughout that game. They were just taking pot shot after pot shot from 40 and 50 yards out. Now, a few of them went over and they were brilliant, but overall it actually cost them how often they did that. And then Tyrone beat Kerry 114 to 112. So this could be a very good final as well.
Yeah, did you see, I'm just trying to find it here, I put out, TG Catter had a clip of one of the Tyrone fellas, Micheál McLeanan, and he looks like Brock Lesnar. Like he is an absolute animal. He picks up the ball in the middle of the field and just is handing off lads.
Harold through, I remember.
Yeah, just outrageous strength. And you're thinking, this guy's so big, he hardly has the football as well, and he just coasts the ball over the bar beautifully. But he's an absolute freak of a young fella. This should be a good game. This should be an interesting game again. I'm just looking back at the clip of him here. He's huge. He must be 6'5" or 6'6", about 16 stone, I'd say. But that's another interesting game. Like, this is a mad weekend. Just so many games. Can't wait to review the action on Monday and see what mistakes we made and see what we learned over the weekend.
Well, we're definitely going to do loads of that. Great stuff. Spread the word out there. Get people to sign up to patreon.com/our game. Michael, we'll see you on Monday.
See you, Ciaran.